video conference with no physical meeting location. Members of the public wishing to observe the meeting may do so live at mountainview.lightystar.com, on YouTube at mountainview.gov/YouTube, and on Comcast Channel 26. As noted in the meeting agenda, members of the public may provide oral public comments during the public comment period of an item by joining the Zoom webinar with the webinar ID of 853-0070-5240. Emails and voicemail messages received by the staff by 5 p.m. were forwarded to the EPC. All votes will be taken by roll call vote, and I ask the EPC clerk to call the roll. Ms. Zoe?
All right. Commissioner Clark?
Here.
Commissioner Dempsey?
Here.
Commissioner Gutierrez?
Here.
Commissioner Haymeyer?
Here.
Commissioner Nunes?
Here.
Vice Chair In?
Here.
Chair Creston?
Here.
All right. All commissioners are here.
First item, the next item on the agenda is the minutes. We will be reviewing the minutes from August 17th and October 19th, 2022 meetings. Do any commissioners have any comments or questions I'd like to discuss on the minutes as they were distributed? None. We'll open up to public comment. Would any member on the line like to comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Phone users can mute and unmute themselves with *6. EPC clerk will start the timer and let you know when your time is up. Do we have anyone wishing to speak on the minutes?
I don't see anyone raise hand. No, no one.
All right, and we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and a motion. Any of the above? Discussion or motion? Commissioner Haymeyer.
Sure. Can we do them together? If they're no
I think so.
Just wanted to make sure. It's been a little while. I move to adopt the August 17th and October 19th, 2022 meeting minutes as submitted by staff in the staff report.
And Vice Chair Yin.
I will second that motion.
Ms. Zhao, can you take the roll?
Commissioner Clark?
Aye.
Commissioner Dempsey?
Aye.
Commissioner Gutierrez?
Aye.
Commissioner Haymeyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Nunes?
Aye.
Vice Chair In?
Aye.
And Chair Cranston?
Aye.
All right. Motion carries unanimously.
All right. So we'll move on to item 4, oral communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the EPC on a matter that is not on the agenda this evening. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes during this section. State law prohibits the commission from acting on any non-agenda item. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on a non-agenda item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Phone users can mute and unmute themselves by pressing *6. EPC clerk will start the timer to let you know when your time is up. Do we have anyone wishing to speak in open communication?
I don't see anyone from the public raise hand. No one here.
And we'll bring it back to the commission. Item number 5.1 is a public hearing on affordable housing development at 1265 Montecito Avenue. First, do any commissioners wish to make any disclosures regarding the applicant or site visits? Commissioner Gutierrez.
Thank you, sir. I met with the applicant and I also did a drive-by. Thank you.
Commissioner Haymeyer.
I met with the applicant and also visited the site. And I should say I attended in 2021, just as an observer, the original hearing on this, or not hearing, but public comment session.
Vice Chair Yin.
I did meet with the the person who's proposing, And I didn't visit the site, but I have been there in the past, and I Google walked it.
Good. Commissioner Dempsey.
I met with the applicant online and I checked out the site online. I've also been there a million times.
Okay. Commissioner Munoz.
I had a chance to meet with the applicant.
Commissioner Clark.
I've been to the site a few times. I believe I didn't meet with the applicant this time around, but I believe I've met with them before when they were originally proposing this a few years ago.
Excuse me, and I met briefly with the applicant, and I drive by the site at least once a week, so I've seen it quite a bit. So we will start with a presentation from Edgar Maravilla, Senior Planner, and Rebecca Shapiro, Deputy Zoning Administrator. Edgar?
Yes, thank you. Let me go ahead and bring up the presentation. Okay, that should be up. Good evening, Chair, Planning Commissioners, and members of the public. My name is Edgar Maravilla, Senior Planner for the City of Mountain View, and today I'm here to present a 100% affordable housing project at 1265 Montecito Avenue. The project parcel is located on the south corner of Montecito Avenue and North Shoreline Boulevard. It is an exterior parcel approximately 1.04 acres and has an existing 12,300 square foot vacant two-story office building, which is proposed to be redeveloped into an 85-unit, 100% affordable housing project. The parcel is surrounded by multiple uses, including a shopping center anchored by a Safeway grocery store to the north, a 3-story multifamily residential project to the south, a self-car wash to the east, and a 2-story multifamily residential project to the west. This is a NOFA project that was allocated city funds and therefore has gone through 2 additional meetings as shown in the slide. The project was presented at a neighborhood meeting on January 14, 2021. Presented to the NOFA Review Committee on June 7, 2021, presented to City Council for funding reservations on June 22, 2021, presented at 2 Development Review Committee meetings held on November 2021 and July 2022, today's Environmental Planning Commission meeting, and City Council is tentatively scheduled for December 6, 2022. The project is a 100% affordable housing project proposing 85 units. The site has an existing general plan designation of neighborhood commercial and a zoning designation of CN neighborhood commercial, not allowing for residential uses. To allow residential uses, the applicant is requesting a general plan map amendment to high density residential and a zoning map amendment to R4 high density residential. The project has also been processed by way of a development review permit, a heritage tree removal permit to remove 6 heritage trees located within the proposed building footprint in the bioretention areas. Further, the project was also reviewed by way of an initial study pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act. Here's the site plan. Parking for the site is provided in an at-grade podium garage level tucked behind the building area with a raised entry plaza along the Montecito Avenue frontage. Vehicle access to the garage is provided via single driveway entrance to and from Montecito Avenue along the westerly property line. The project includes a bicycle room facing North Shoreline Boulevard, allowing for easy access, shown in blue. There are also several open space amenities, including a small gathering space with a barbecue area in the southwest corner, shown in orange, a children's play area, and other smaller amenity space, shown in yellow. These spaces are connected via exterior stairs to a larger landscape podium courtyard on the second level. The project also includes off-site sidewalk upgrades. Specifically, the sidewalk width will be extended from 5 feet to 10 feet to accommodate landscape and 10 new street trees, shown in purple. The project was reviewed by the Development Review Committee and recommended for approval with 2 conditions. That is, to fill in the void left by the removal of the balconies to meet fire clearance and to work with staff to provide a high-quality, smooth stucco finish. Overall, the design is a simple modern design with a mix of 6 primary materials, which include stucco, horizontal fiber cement siding, vertical cement siding, cedar siding, decorative metal panels, and accent steel in limited locations such as the project frontage. The color palette is primarily white, gray, and a warmer orange color with a brighter red accent color employed at key locations. Overall, the project is compliant with the applicable R4 zoning regulations pursuant to prohibitions of the state density bonus law. The R4 standards allow up to 80 units per acre and 84 units per the parcel size. The project is proposing 85 units, one more than the allowed city density. For that reason, the applicant is requesting a 1.2% state density bonus. Additionally, per state density bonus law, the project qualifies for 4 incentives / concessions and unlimited waivers. The project is only requesting 1 concession to provide no additional personal storage. The proposed units will include bedroom closets, and some units have additional common area closets, but no additional personal storage would be provided. The project site is located within half a mile of a major transit stop, and that is the Downtown Transit Center. Thereby, it qualifies for a state density bonus parking requirement, which are half a space per unit. This project is only required to provide 44 parking spaces, and they are providing 45. Again, overall, the project is compliant with the applicable R4 zoning regulations pursuant to prohibitions of the state density bonus law. With that said, here's the formal recommendation as shown on the staff report. Staff recommends the Environmental Planning Commission recommends to City Council that they approve the proposed project as conditioned. Thank you, and that concludes staff presentation. More than glad to take questions. As a reminder, the project applicant team is here and can also assist with answering questions. I also believe they have a presentation.
I would be speaking for the applicant.
Hi, I will be. I'm Marvel Lang. I'm with Charities Housing. Also with me is Kathy Robinson and Edgar. I think you're in the controls, right? If you could also elevate Joe Head as a panelist. I don't see him on here. Should I just go ahead into the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay,
bring up the...
share my screen. All right, can everyone see that?
Yep, we can see it now.
Okay, thank you. Well, good evening, commissioners. First and foremost, I want to thank Edgar, Rebecca, and the entire planning staff on all their hard work on the project. It's been a journey, but I think it's safe to say we're all very happy and with the resulting project. So again, I'm Marvel Lang. I'm a senior project manager at Charities Housing. Here with me is Kathy Robinson and Joe Head from Charities Housing, and also Kevin Bussett from Studio E, our architect. So here we go. First, I'll go over a little bit about Charities Housing. So we're Charities Housing. Our mission is to develop, preserve, own, and manage affordable homes. We primarily work in the South Bay area. One thing I would highlight is we own and manage all of our affordable communities. That's something we take great pride in. You know, we build in the community and really become part of the community as we stay with the development after it's built. We primarily serve extremely and very low income households. Most of our units are income restricted between 0 and 50% area median income, or AMI. We originally were affiliated with Catholic Charities, but incorporated in 1993. And so we've been around for a while. Our portfolio currently includes over 1,400 homes across 28 properties. We have 2 under construction currently, looking to add 106 more homes. And, you know, over the next some odd years, we are looking to add 1,000 plus more homes throughout the South Bay area. So this is a map of all of our affordable communities. As you can see, we're all over the South Bay area, primarily in Santa Clara County. You can see we have projects in San Jose, Santa Clara, Campbell, Los Gatos, Cupertino, Sunnyvale, even Mountain View, you know, really all over the South Bay. Next, I'll present a few project examples. So Studio E, as I mentioned, is the architect on the project. We have been working with Studio E for 15 years now. It's been a very successful partnership. We've built 9 100% affordable housing projects over the Bay Area, and here are some pictures of a few of those projects. And I will highlight 2 next that we worked at Studio E, the first being the Veranda. This one is in Cupertino. We completed this in 2019. It's 3 stories, 18 studio units. There's 6 permanent supportive housing units, or PSH. The affordability range is between 30 and 50% AMI. And this was actually the first project to be funded and completed with Measure A bond funding. The next Studio E project, or the second one I mentioned, is the Metropolitan. This one is in San Jose. It is a large family project completed in 2018 in 2 phases. It's 4 stories with 102 homes. And as a large family project, 50% of the units are 2 and 3 bedrooms, and there's an affordability range between 30 to 60% AMI. And the last charities project example I'll present to you tonight is San Antonio Place. This one is right here in Mountain View. We completed this in 2006. It's 3 stories, 120 studio units, 40 PSH units, between 15 to 45% AMI income restrictions. So I'll briefly go over a few project highlights. Edgar did a great job going over it, but as you know, it's a 100% affordable project, 85 units. One thing I highlight is it's a large family project, something we're very happy to be able to present to you. So that means we have 21 2 bedrooms and 21 3 bedrooms. We're very excited about that, as we know it's in need. There's 84 affordable homes, and we're looking at income restrictions between 30 to 60% AMI. The target population is going to be families with children, extremely and very low income households, and we are anticipating having 42 rapid rehousing units in the project through the county's Measure A funding. Just a few amenities to highlight here. We have a good amount of common and private open space for residents to enjoy: large community room on the ground floor, on-site laundry, indoor secured bike parking, on-site property management services office. And the last bullet here, it's a really great location. It's right across the street from Safeway. It's a half mile from a lot of amenities, including public transit options, bus routes, VTA light rail orange line, Caltrain, parks, pharmacy, an elementary school. It's right by the farmers market and Castro Street, and a lot of community resources such as a community service agency. It's really just a wonderful site. In terms of sustainable strategies, these are our typical strategies. We recently committed to building all 100% electric buildings, and Montecito is included. We look to provide rooftop solar panels, drought-tolerant native plants, sustainable finishes, EV charging stations, secured bike parking, and alternate transportation methods. And ultimately, we pursue an equivalent to LEED Gold and Greenpoint Gold rating or better. And at all of our developments, our residents receive services from Catholic Charities. On the right here, you can see a very abridged list of services they provide. We also strive to have food delivery at our sites. And for our special needs residents, we have supportive services through a supportive service provider or through the county, depending on the structure of the project. And with that, I'll hand it off to Kevin, our architect, who will go over the project design.
Thank you very much, Marvel, and good evening, commissioners. Edgar did a pretty good job explaining the site, so I'll try and go over some of the details. This is, again, 1265 Montecito. It's bordered on the west by a 2-story apartment building, to the south by a 3-story apartment building and Safeway across the street, and the intersection of North Shoreline Boulevard. The massing strategy for this project was to identify the maximum zoning envelope, which is a 60-foot height limit with 15-foot setbacks on all 4 sides, and then to arrange a L-shaped bar of double-loaded units along the north and west property lines. And then the key move to reduce the bulk and scale of the building was to split that into 2, which allowed us to increase the density and also created an opportunity to run landscaping and open space through the center of the site. The two halves of the building are connected by an aerial bridge that spans the level 2 landscape podium. There's an entry plaza and a rear open space at the back. And over the last 2 years, we've worked with city staff to further refine the design and articulate the facade with recessed private balconies, parapets that step in and out and up and down, bay windows facing the street frontage, lowered building volumes at the corners to better relate to the lower scale existing buildings on Montecito, including 4-story volumes at the driveway and at the North Shoreline intersection. And further, we added decorative screens, awning overhangs, and accent siding materials. This is a view of the finished project showing all of those elements together. You can see, again, decorative screens, eave overhangs, parapets stepping in and out and up and down, the accent volumes that are clad in a vertical staggered fiber cement batten siding painted with an accent red oxide color. There is cedar colored lap siding at the back side of all the private awnings, or private balconies, excuse me. The balcony railings have a custom pattern of decorative sheet metal. And you can see new street trees and parkway along the Montecito Avenue frontage. On the driveway side, you can see that we've employed the same strategies to reduce the bulk and scale and add rhythm, where the building faces the 2-story apartments and lower density residential to the west. And you can see that the main strategy for stormwater retention and treatment is a stormwater garden along the Montecito sidewalk, which will have planting and low planting to create a buffer between the common spaces and the sidewalk. This is a typical upper level floor plan showing the unit disposition with a combination of studios, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. You can see the bridge in the center, and this is the level 2 podium plan showing the planted podium. And then at the ground floor, we have tucked the parking into the middle of the site and screened it with a combination of cast in place, board formed concrete, decorative screens, and put a bar of common spaces, including the common room, offices, property management, lobby, and mail along the front of the site to activate the Montecito Avenue frontage. There's an entry plaza off Montecito. You can see the bike storage to the left or the right of the entry plaza, and behind that is the at-grade manager's unit with a private patio and its own entry porch. At the very rear of the site, you see the rear play area with the on-site laundry room immediately adjacent for supervising children. And all the utilities are pushed to the very back of the site at the end of the driveway, including trash, electric rooms, and fire pumps and mechanical. These are eye-level perspectives along Montecito, likely from the Safeway parking lot. Again, you can see the architectural strategy to bring the eye down through the use of projecting awnings over the balconies, parapets that step in and out to modulate the roof line, attention paid to transparency along the ground floor, especially at the community room where there's large double glazed French doors, and also the idea of creating a welcoming entry patio, or entry plaza, excuse me. This is a close-up view of the entry plaza showing an accessible ramp up to the entry door, which also accesses the bike storage. And you can see a site stair with an entry trellis welcoming residents and guests in from the street. And both of these elements span over our stormwater garden, which is landscaped and provides a landscape frontage along Montecito. This is a view from Montecito going eastbound towards Shoreline, also showing the stormwater garden in front of the community room, which has glazed French doors to allow that space to activate the sidewalk. And here's a closer up view of the rear play area with 2 natural play features consisting of boulders and logs on a rubberized surface. And you can see that we've also treated the rear stair with the same care as some of the other volumes on the front facade by cladding it in the staggered vertical batten siding. And the final image today is a view of the rear of the project from shoreline, where you can see the same strategies employed on the back. Staggered parapets, accent materials at the receding portions of the facade, staggered windows mixed with stacked windows, and step-down volumes at the corners. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so I'll bring it to the commission for questions. Do any commissioners have questions for either staff or the applicant? Commissioner Gutierrez.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. So I have a quick question. What made you go for this type of plate structure as opposed to a traditional one?
Well, I think we felt that it was, it was nice to make it a little more natural. The idea is that there's also adult play equipment in this area. So this is meant to serve all residents. So we didn't want it to feel like it was specifically for one portion of the resident population.
And I would just add, chiming in, that I believe this was actually a topic of discussion when the project came through for funding authorization with City Council, and the naturalistic play structure idea was something that got a lot of positive feedback through that process as well.
Cool. I just wanted to double check that so that for those of us who weren't part of the process would know this had been covered. And then a friendly reminder that maybe about a block away, there's 2 schools with a lot of natural plate structures and traditional ones as well. So I think you did a good job on that front. Thank you.
Commissioner Dempsey.
Yeah, just 2 really quick questions. First question for the applicant. I just wanted to ask about closets. If I understand correctly, that there's not going to be closet space set aside for the units. I thought that was an interesting choice, and I can understand why you would do it, because it means you can get more units in there, which means we have some more people. Do any of your other units that you've already built follow the same model where you don't have closets, and how has that worked out? I'm just sort of curious to know, in your experience, what has that meant for tenants who live without closets?
I can speak a bit to Charity's experience. The project, we do have closets in the bedroom, and I think we have like coat closets and things to that effect. So there is storage in the units. The concession really is that we did not want to provide the 80 square feet requirement, as in our experience, the amount of storage that we're providing is similar to the projects that we have in general. And as I mentioned, Studio E and we have worked together a lot. So this is a design that has worked in our previous projects. It's been adequate storage and has a proven track record. And as you alluded to, between that and the choice of adding more units, reducing overall costs, it was pretty clear that this was a concession that made sense.
Thank you for clearing that up. I apologize that I had it wrong. It sounds like you just have kind of smaller than regulation closets, but so that's fine. Thank you. And the last question I had was for staff. There was, I think, an email we had gotten from the public. Somebody was worried about jaywalking. I'm curious to know if staff has put any thought into whether there would need to be a mid-block crosswalk. What's the short answer to that?
Great question. I did reach out to the Public Works department and get their insight on this. In this particular case, they did not take into consideration a mid-block crossing, as those are typically placed a minimum of 400 feet from lighted intersections, and as there is a lighted intersection there at the corner of Montecito Avenue and North Shoreline Boulevard. So that's the reason behind that.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Yin.
Yes. Thank you for the presentation. I just had a couple of questions. Commissioner Dempsey had brought up the storage, and I had one question about the storage, and I was going to ask the architect. I know you had said that you felt that there was enough storage. But in my experience, at least, especially for families, it's really hard to just use the coat closets because there's just, larger items. I was wondering, when you said common storage, where that was, because it doesn't have to necessarily be 80 square feet per unit, or per person per unit, I believe it was. But I was wondering if there were some nooks and crannies where we could find a bit of storage that maybe people who need it could then have a locker or something and padlock it. Is that something that is possible? Without adding too much cost?
Yes, I mean, I think we quickly realized, well, I guess I would add, we are providing bike storage for one bike for every unit, so a total of 85 racks. So in a sense, that is storage. Our storage is also proportional to the size of the unit. So the studios get a closet, the 1 bedrooms get a closet, plus a smaller hall closet. And then the 2 and 3 bedrooms actually have fairly sizable closets in the hallway. So I did a quick calculation before the meeting, and a 3-bedroom unit has 320 cubic feet of closet space. The requirement for the zoning was to provide 160 cubic feet or 80 square feet. So just to put it in perspective, we are providing a fair amount of closet space in a 1,000 square foot 3-bedroom unit. Between that and the bike storage, we understand that there's bulky items that are hard to find a place for, but again, we're forced to make trade-offs every day with a lot of competing interests, one of which being financial feasibility and providing as many affordable units as we can.
Sure. I just want to make sure that we're not sacrificing practicality in terms of being able to live comfortably and easily.
Right. And just to add, we've tried to make whatever closets we've provided, we've tried to make them full depth and wide enough to be practical. So we understand.
Yeah, it's good that you have like slightly more per unit then, in terms of closet space that you normally have, and that might help sort of alleviate the issue there. One other question was the barbecue area that's tucked into the very back corner. Typically the barbecue areas are kind of near the space where people can kind of hang out and sit down and eat, be together. And since it's so far back, kind of near the trash cans, it's very, very far from the open space. I was wondering if that's even necessary. Perhaps there's a way to move the trash over to that zone and then therefore free up some space near the laundry room for just a little bit of storage for anybody who happens to have some bulky items where they could just, place it under padlock.
I think the idea with the barbecue, speaking on behalf of our landscape architect, was to just provide a variety of spaces where people could do different things, right? So the idea with the barbecue pit is that it's relatively nearby the play area and the laundry. And, as for trash, the trash is inside a room, so it's not as if they're right next to an open enclosure. But that's a good idea, and we'll take it under consideration.
Okay, so you feel
one more point on the trash room location. I believe some of its location is defined by the points in the building where on each floor residents can access the trash room and chutes. Mm-hmm. So there are some constraints on where the trash room can be if that service amenity is provided at each floor.
Okay, no, I understand that. Thank you. It just seemed sort of like a little bit of an odd area for the barbecue. So if there's a better use for it, I'm all for it too. I'm not sure what the residents might prefer, but since they're not living there yet, it's kind of hard for them to provide any input. Okay. Also in the drawings, I noticed that on the floors, there's something called a WH. Is that the trash chute area, or they're
no?
Like,
so in order to provide an all-electric building, one of the major energy demands is water heating.
Water heater. Okay.
So instead of a central boiler, we actually have trios of electric heat pump water heaters every 4 units. So that's what those are.
Okay. Thanks. Appreciate the answers.
Commissioner Gutierrez, other questions?
Thank you. Yes, quick follow-up question in terms of the bike storage. So we've got a lot of 2 and 3 bedroom units, which means hopefully we'll have a lot of families that'll be part of the community. And there's a school close by and what have you, or 2 of them, which is nice. So here's my question, right? If I understood you correctly, I think you mentioned 1 bike per unit, but many cases when there's more than 1 child, there's more than 1 bike. So how would you tackle that situation? And I'm wondering if it's one of those where if other units, like let's say the studios, don't have a need for a bike, that then there'll be an allocation for the family that needs 2 bike storage places to then be given 1. So that's my question. How would you deal with that situation?
So I'll let Marvel handle that one.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So you kind of hit it on the head. We don't expect every unit necessarily to have a bike or use it. So we do try to be flexible. Of course, we try to let everyone that needs bike space to use it, but we do expect to have extras. So some of them would be able to use the extra spaces, and that is part of that solution.
So the possible solution is that those who don't use it will then
those additional spaces would be available to to families. So the studio unit doesn't use it, then and in our experience that kind of works out pretty well.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Thank you.
Commissioner Dempsey, another question?
Yeah, I can't believe I have more storage questions. Do your lease agreements allow tenants to store personal property on those little tiny balconies? I think some of the units have small balconies, do they not? Do I understand that correctly?
They do.
Does your lease agreement allow people to store personal property on those balconies?
No, they're not. Yeah, so in the lease agreement, they're not allowed to store, they're not allowed to store property on personal property, as you put it, on the balconies. Of course, like furniture and whatnot, patio furniture, things like that is okay.
Oh, that's fantastic, because I was kind of worried if you didn't have enough storage, you might start seeing a lot of boxes creeping up on the balcony, and that's not something that other folks are going to want to look at. I think it's really more of a comment than a question. Have you spent any time thinking about, given the storage constraints, putting lockers? I think Vice Chair Yen had mentioned something about lockers, putting lockers up in the parking spaces, at the very edge of the parking space. I've seen actually other apartment buildings that have those. Is that something that you've looked at to give people a little bit extra storage space that you could padlock? Is that something that you've looked at?
Kevin, I'll defer that to you.
We haven't looked at it in great detail since we had requested the concession, but under these parking garages, unlike a smaller density project, there's a lot of mechanical and electrical equipment. So they would have to be dropped down. So in short, no, we haven't looked into it in great detail.
You might want to consider it. That's it.
Vice Chair, did you have another question?
Apologies, my hand was still raised by accident.
And this maybe Rebecca can answer this because she's on the head of the DRC, right? I didn't in the description of the property, I didn't hear stucco anywhere in the description of what's there, but the DRC said something about trying to work in stucco. I don't get it.
No, there's a cementitious, sorry, long day. I was at DRC earlier today. There are stucco components of the building, and the discussion at DRC was just trying to make sure that it didn't have too rough a texture and was comparable to what we tend to see in other developments in Mountain View. So there are stucco wall surfaces. I believe the white wall areas that you see on the elevation are one of the key areas where stucco is used.
And then the balcony issue for the fire department, is that all the balconies on that side of the building, or is it just
No, it's
lower
only
level?
on the west elevation where the entry drive is located. The fire requirements are for a 26 foot wide lane with, I think it's 14 and a half feet of vertical clearance. Edgar probably, it's stamped on his eyeballs. But so unfortunately, the second floor balconies on the west elevation specifically had to be removed in order to provide for compliant fire access while retaining the landscape buffer along the westerly property line where there are existing cypress trees that I believe the project will be retaining.
So it's just that second floor that would lose the balcony.
Correct,
Okay,
on the west elevation.
Commissioner Clark?
It's just a quick question for the applicant. With the reservation of funding, I should have just gone back to the prior meetings to look. But with the reservation of funding, assuming all goes well, do you need to go out for other funding, tax credits, those sorts of things, or will you be pretty much ready to go? I'm just trying to get a sense of timeline and how far we are from realizing this project after it's all approved.
Sure, absolutely. After we're approved, we have the city funding. We are anticipating county funding, as I mentioned, and we're also hoping to allocate project-based vouchers. And with all of that combined and entitlement approvals, we are hoping to apply for tax credits actually the first round of next year. So, that would mean we would start construction at the end of 2023, and we potentially be done by the end of 2025. So that's kind of the timeline that we're working on right now.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Any other commissioner questions? Now we'll open up for public comment. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Phone users can mute and unmute themselves with *6. EPC clerk will start the timer and let you know when your time is up. Joe, do we have any people looking to speak?
Yes, I have one speaker here. All right, David Watson, you may speak now.
Yep. Hi, I'm David Watson. I'm a member of Mountain View YIMBY, and we endorse this project. We're in favor of it. Not only that, I actually live on this street. I guess 2 blocks away, although they're pretty long blocks, and I really like this project. I'm happy to see it. I walk by where this is anytime I want to walk to downtown, and it'll be nice for there to be a new building there instead of an old one. That'll be terrific. I'll be happy to see sidewalk improvements and the normal stuff that happens when there's new construction. So that's all terrific. I'm not sure I have much more to say. I think I'm impressed by the work that the architect did to fit a couple more units by splitting up that L shape. That's really cool. With the bridge, I know you're working within the tough constraints of the dual staircase mandate, and you've done a great job of finding a way to fit just a couple more units, which is really, really great to see. So Mountain View needs more housing, more affordable housing, and this is it, and I like to see it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker. Joe, you're on mute.
All right, the next person is Sija Paymer. You can speak now.
Hi, I'm Celia Paymer. I'm speaking on behalf of Green Spaces Mountain View. Love that there's more housing. We're always looking to make Mountain View a more inclusive place, but we were wondering if there was a possibility of opening up the Hetch Hetchy right-of-way south of the Montecito property. This would both be a community benefit and one for our new residents as well. So something to consider as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
No, that's all the speakers.
All right, and we'll bring it back to the commission for deliberation and action. So, Commissioner Clark.
Yeah, I'll go first. And just to address the last public speaker, I totally agree with you. That would be wonderful. I can personally attest to having gone to battle with the PUC over that strip of land for the adjacent project a number of years ago, and I can tell you that unfortunately they are not amenable to opening that up. I wish they were, but not only would they not let us do that, but they also almost tanked the adjacent subsidized housing project over it because of the parking, which was required for that project. So in any case, wonderful idea, but I'm afraid unless staff knows something otherwise, I think unfortunately that avenue is closed. The PUC is not amenable to doing that on Hetch Hetchy, as far as I know. Overall, I think this is a great project. It's been great to watch it grow and evolve. I think it's a really great use of, the layout is a great use of that particular parcel. I think it will add a lot, and it's always great to have the additional affordable housing. I am sad to lose some of the trees and the redwood grove, but at the end of the day, what I really look at from in those perspectives is where the canopy is going to be in 10 to 15 years, and it's going to be a better canopy than we have today, with trees that don't use as much, that don't require as much water like redwoods do, which aren't native to that particular area, and are increasingly due to droughts in poorer and poorer health and are difficult to remove at that point. So I think overall the trade-offs make sense here. I understand the storage concerns, but I think that's a fine trade-off in terms of a concession. I can attest personally that, especially during the pandemic, that any storage that isn't in a unit that's secured is a prime theft target. So anything in a garage, the complex where I live in, people don't sneak into the garage to go break into cars. They sneak into the garage to break open all the storage cages, cut the locks, and go out and just take everything out. So as much as I love storage, anything that isn't provided in a unit is unfortunately creates a prime theft target and a security concern. So overall, I'm supportive of the project. I'm happy to, when folks have said their piece, I'm happy to move the staff recommendation, but I won't do that right now. I'll let everyone else chime in first.
Vice Chair Yin.
Yes, I agree that generally this is a very nice project. I think it's pretty clever how they did the split to make use of the lot shape, and it provides a break in a wall that's much taller than what is there now. So it makes it more comfortable as you're walking down the sidewalk, which I also appreciate. We've added the greenery, and I do like the stormwater and landscape planter idea to take care of some of the drainage. Yeah, aside from storage, which, I just wanted to make sure it was going to be practical and usable, and whether or not there were ways we can just claw out a little storage for those who might need it, that would be up to the architect if they can find a little bit. But I'm glad to hear that some of the storage in unit is larger than the standard. So that will help somewhat. I did have a question, I'm sorry, and this may be for staff. It just came to me. I know that there's a right-of-way on the corner, and when you're on the site, you can see a well-worn path that people take as a shortcut around. I was wondering if the city had any plans to sort of formalize that and make that area a little bit, I don't know, make it look a little bit more a part of the site with greenery and whatnot.
I'll let Edgar chime in if I'm remembering incorrectly, but I know that plot of land did come up in discussions with the applicant. There were questions about whether it could be incorporated into the site or, improved with landscaping. One of the things we learned from our public works staff, or rather were reminded of by our public works staff, is they're working on the broader Shoreline Boulevard corridor improvements, and the Montecito Shoreline Stearland intersection is at some point in the future slated to get some improvements. And so our public works staff felt it important to reserve that space, knowing that intersection was going to see changes in the future.
Okay, great. Thank you. In general, yes, I'll be supporting the project.
Mr. Nunez.
Yeah, I will be happy to support this project.
Commissioner Dempsey.
And I would just add, despite all my kvetching about storage, I actually think this is a wonderful project. We don't get to see 100% affordables come through here, every 2 weeks. So it's kind of a special thing. And the fact that it's got an emphasis on larger families with the larger 2 and 3 bedroom units, that's fantastic. We need that. And those families need that. Forget I complained about all the storage. What you're doing really is wonderful, and it's going to be really good for Mountain View. And I'm really excited about it. It's a good location. You're going to end up with about 4-to-1 on planting more trees. That's wonderful, and it's going to be great in 15 years. And particularly, I'm really glad to see that the city is contributing money to this project. I love it that we are going to, we're going to walk the talk, and we're going to help make this happen. So I'm going to be proud to support this project tonight.
Commissioner Hemeyer.
Just to echo my fellow commissioners, really excited to support this project. It's a fairly narrow project parcel, and I think the design is innovative, and just so excited that it'll be close to a lot of services, and to hear that Public Works has this intersection on the list for future improvements. So great project. Excited to have it built, and I think the timeline was expedited from when I had last checked in on this. So end of 2025 isn't that far away.
Thank you. Commissioner Gutierrez.
Thank you, sir. Yes. So my only question is for the applicant, hey, do you have any more? Can you pitch in with any additional sites in Mountain View? If you have future potential here, and I think you'll have a city government along with an EPC that's open to these ideas. So I want to thank you for your ability to bring something online that's realistic, that's doable, and that it has also involved partnerships throughout the city and the county. That always is a key for me. I like the partnerships. I think we've done a lot with that at the school district level, and now at the city level, you're seeing more and more of these types of items and projects come to life. So thank you for your efforts on this front. Appreciate it.
Most of my commissioners have said what I said, but in particular, the larger units is something that really appealed to me. So unless there are other comments, I will have my endorsements by asking Commissioner Clark if he'd like to now actually make a motion.
Okay, I will move the staff recommendation as printed in the staff report.
Commissioner Hemeyer?
And I'll second.
There's no further discussion. Now, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Clark?
Aye.
Commissioner Dempsey?
Aye.
Commissioner Gutierrez?
Aye.
Commissioner Hemeyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Nunez?
Aye.
Vice Chair In?
Aye.
Chair Cranston?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, everyone. That we will move on to item 5.2, the temporary downtown precise plan office cap. We'll have a presentation from Krishna Penalar and Advanced Planning Manager Eric Anderson.
All right, thank you. Okay, good evening, commissioners. My name is Krisha Penoyar, Associate Planner, and I'm joined by Eric Anderson, Advanced Planning Manager. The item in front of you is a proposed downtown precise plan amendment to create a temporary office cap. City staff is proposing a temporary precise plan amendment to limit office development to 0.35 FAR, where FARs previously ranged from 1.3 to 4.0. The image to your right highlights areas where office uses are allowed. These items are noted in blue and would thus be impacted by these amendments. This temporary office limit applies to new construction and additions associated with office development only. The limit does not apply to residential or other commercial uses such as retail restaurants. Staff would like to clarify that this would also not make existing offices non-conforming, so they would not be impacted by these proposed amendments. Additionally, certain projects would be exempted from this 0.35 FAR limit, such as small additions for building upgrades, government-owned property, projects with a development agreement, and currently entitled projects. This limitation is only temporary and is proposed to sunset December 31st, 2024 to allow staff to implement policies to manage parking and create incentives to improve the jobs housing imbalance in downtown. The city is already going through a downtown precise plan amendment, which are limited in scope and only limited to certain areas in downtown. This proposed amendment to cap office development is separate as it covers all of downtown and focuses specifically on impacts of office development. So the intent of the amendments are to help improve the jobs housing balance, manage parking impacts from employment generating uses such as large office buildings, while finding the appropriate balance of daytime population from office uses to support retail and restaurants in downtown. To provide some context to this amendment, here's a brief overview of the ongoing trends in downtown. Over the years, the city has seen a growing trend of new large-scale office developments in downtown, such as the recently approved 590 Castro Street project. As a result of these increased jobs related to office growth, there are increased concerns regarding parking impacts to adjacent residential neighborhoods, increased competition for public parking spaces, and further impacts on the existing jobs housing imbalance. The city currently has existing programs in place to manage downtown parking. A majority of the parking in downtown is city-owned and managed. The city also requires new developments and change in uses with higher parking demands to pay a parking in lieu fee or build its own parking. The in lieu fees are intended to help the city pay for a new parking structure if additional parking is needed. In 2020, the city adopted the downtown parking strategy to create a framework to continue managing downtown parking. However, with the passage of new state legislation, AB 2097, such state-led bills prohibits the city's ability to have minimum parking requirements or charge an in lieu fee payment for sites near major transit stops, such as the Mountain View Downtown Transit Center. So if a large amount of office uses get built without parking, this may strain the public parking supply. However, as stated before, an appropriate mix of uses is needed to continue supporting local retail and restaurants in downtown, and staff needs additional time to study what that mix would look like. So in conclusion, staff recommends for EPC to recommend City Council to adopt the resolution amending the downtown precise plan to include a temporary limit on office development. Thank you for your time, and staff is available for any additional questions.
The commissioners, Commissioner Haywire.
Thank you. I just have a handful of questions. Maybe starting with the largest one first. I'm trying to understand the urgency for this. I know that there's some staff planning that needs to happen, but maybe you can help me understand why this 2-year period is so critical and what would happen to the projects that are in the pipeline right now. And we got a couple of public comment letters from proposals that are in the works. So I'd love to hear from staff on those 2 items. And then my final question would be around the timing of the transit center, if there are any updates you can share.
Sure. Well, I'll start with the simplest. I don't have any updates on the transit center master plan, unfortunately. I can look into that and maybe report back at a future meeting. The urgency is really about the, this new state law was just adopted and goes into effect in January. So I think that's a major factor. I think the tenor of concern from the community and from council also kind of prompted quick action. And so I think all of that coming together, it really is this is an opportunity that, the EPC and City Council can consider for kind of how to study these issues over the next couple of years. We do expect a lot of interest in office development downtown. And unfortunately, if a lot of underutilized sites kind of move forward with office development, we may lose opportunities for residential development or other mix of uses that may be of interest. So really just acting proactively. Regarding the projects under review. So as of the date that this amendment was noticed, we didn't have any projects under review that would be negatively impacted by this amendment. However, as you received a letter from one group that was interested in building office and has submitted and then subsequently withdrawn applications with the city, they have now submitted an application as of a couple of days ago for a new office development. So they would be affected by this application or by this amendment if it were not changed.
So that's the 705 Dana
that's
project.
The Dana.
And then there was also 194 to 198 Castro. We received public comment.
That's right. Yeah, we have had some informal conversation with them, as of 2021. The last time I believe we shared any information with them or discussed anything with them was in very early 2022. They have not submitted an application. So it really is, we weren't aware that they were moving forward with the project. It may, negatively affect them if they are interested in submitting an application in the near future, but they hadn't submitted an application.
Okay. And then if I can indulge my commissioners with one more question, Eric, I'd love to follow up. So does the city or the downtown committee, is there someone that has like an inventory of the potential sites that you could imagine a mix of uses? Because I thought that we would have to do this broader downtown precise plan update to really even consider residential along Castro in some of these areas. So is that someone's monitoring that, and you think that's feasible to be able to study that in the next couple of years?
I do. I mean, I think it would have to be something that the council would have to prioritize. And so that is going to be a question for council when we bring it before them. But there are still options for how we can use this time to further develop our parking strategies, our downtown parking strategy. We're working on a TDM ordinance, and all of that kind of intersects with these issues that we're seeing downtown in terms of especially parking, but also transportation impacts. So it is something that we can study, but it also wouldn't be wasted time.
Okay. And is paid parking part of that?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, further study of paid parking is certainly in the downtown parking strategy.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Clark.
Yeah, I still have a few questions, some of which sort of dovetail with what Commissioner Haymeyer had asked. So I'm trying to figure out how we got here. Because in my head, the overall strategy of reviewing and making changes to the downtown precise plan was, phase one, really focused on the 100 and 200 blocks, the more historic sections of Castro Street, doing that first. Then phase two, looking at the broader precise plan. I realized a state law was passed, but we presumably had been tracking that for a number of months and maybe had some reasonable expectation that might pass. So I'm just it's unclear to me how this got initiated. Did a majority of council say we want to study capping office? Did staff sort of proactively say, we heard things from the community based on the Sobrato project and the state law and everything, we're going to sort of proactively bring this forward? It feels like it came out of nowhere, but maybe it didn't. Maybe this has been going on since before my time and something that's under consideration. So I'm just trying to figure out how we got here to start with.
Yeah, it was really the latter. Staff seeing an opportunity to kill multiple birds with one stone kind of thing, like I said, the tenor of the discussion with the 590 Castro project really was kind of prompt for staff to work on this and to try to propose a solution that seemed to address a lot of concerns that were coming out from the community and council.
Okay, that's fair. Did we consider alternatives like, I don't know how we picked 0.35. I don't know if we considered, like, instead of just saying you can't build anything above 0.35, maybe anything above 0.35 is, conditional discretionary review. I realize it's just easier to say you can't build above 0.35, but it just feels like I don't know how we arrived at that number and whether we considered alternatives.
We did. We considered a lot of alternatives, including a square footage maximums, including more kind of aggressive caps that would be like no net new, things like that. The 0.35 really supported enough kind of ability for small additions in potential locations where a site might be really underutilized, but also wouldn't create a lot of value for that and would provide for kind of that time and space for the city to study those different incentives. Yeah, and I think, allowing continuing to allow a small amount is also just kind of a good idea in terms of protecting from unforeseen circumstances of maybe takings, concerns, and things like that.
And then there's in the staff report, it talked about concerns that there might be substantial office development that would limit the ability for housing to develop, but then it also called out there aren't a lot of like undeveloped sites remaining. And so I'm trying to figure out in my head if let's take an underutilized parcel. I assume the 0.35 doesn't preclude, if I wanted to do ground floor retail or a dentist office or something on the ground floor and 0.35 of office above, someone could do that, right? The FAR doesn't preclude like some sort of medical services on the ground floor and would allow 0.35 of office above, or?
Yeah, so the office definition that we're using doesn't include medical. So yeah, it could be theoretically, but 0.35, especially on the relatively small sites in downtown, is it could be possible, but we don't expect that to be a valuable approach as opposed to pursuing residential, where you can still do, up to 50 units per acre in a lot of locations downtown. Or potentially even waiting out, the 2 years to see where council ends up.
So basically 0.35, if I wanted to build a pure office on a 0.35 office project on a small parcel downtown, we're really only talking about a few stories, which would almost certainly not pencil given the cost of land.
Yeah, and it would certainly only be, it'd be a couple of thousand square feet on a lot of parcels.
I see.
They're really tiny parcels.
Got it. And then last question, in terms of impacted projects, I know everything with a DA is excluded, but I'm trying to remember, obviously the hotel project that had a DA, I think Marwood had a DA. What about there was I think the bicycle shop had closed, but there's a pending development, I think, at like Castro and El Camino, but I think that's housing. I guess there are no other office projects that we're aware of right now that are in the queue that this would impact aside from the ones you identified?
No, yeah, just the ones from the letters. Those are the only ones that we're aware of.
Okay, that's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Dempsey.
So right now, I think I've got 3 questions, and I believe, Eric, you can help me with these. help me understand the potentiality for exceptions. So there was, I think it was 705 Dana, that there was a letter where they said, you know, they've been trying real hard to do everything right. If this comes, it sort of upsets the apple cart for them. And I believe they even said they'd be willing to, you know, voluntarily pony up for the parking. I guess my question is this: if we pass this measure that you put before us tonight, would an applicant that would, you know, on the face of it, be barred from doing what they wanted to do by this shift, by this cap, would they have the power to come in front of EPC and ask for an exception for it? Or are they just completely blocked out?
No, they would have to go through a gatekeeper process. Whenever council opens up the gatekeeper process, they would have to do that.
There's no exemption procedures for this.
So we included the DA provision, and that's because back when we adopted the downtown parking strategy, council indicated that they would be willing to work with other developers to help fund a new parking structure downtown through a DA process. And so we wanted to keep that door open. So that's really the other avenue, is the DA path.
We are doing more DAs. Are we offering that up as an option, or is that door closed right now?
Well, right now we need to do a little bit more analysis through the Public Works Department has started working on the design for the new garage, and we have to do a little bit more analysis about how much money is needed, how much space in the garage is available. But we do intend, once that analysis is available, to open up an opportunity for partnerships.
And I have a question about the downtown precise plan. And forgive me if this already got mentioned, but when are we slated to do that, to do the revise of that?
It's not scheduled right now. That's one of the things that we're going to be asking council when they take up this this item, and as well, it's going to be probably discussed during early next year's goal setting.
Okay, so perhaps I'm stating the obvious, but if we are going to act on an urgency measure like this, all of the kind of the other work, like doing the precise plan and everything else, I would think that would take on a slightly more urgency in order for us to be consistent. So it sounds like you've already got that in process. My hope would be that we're going to treat the whole thing as an urgency if we're going to move this fast. Last question I had, and I probably could have figured this out if I was a good planner. How far down Castro Street, where's that half-mile sort of end of the blast zone that for purposes of the AB that we've been talking about? Where's that half-mile line cut?
Let's see. I've got my Google Maps open. Fortunately, I always keep it open for just such occasions. It looks like it's at about Church Street.
About Church Street. Okay. So the band that the cap that we're talking about today goes farther than the half-mile zone that would cause the sort of the parking concerns, the parkopolis that would come, because of this new assembly bill. The cap we're talking about goes beyond that. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are a few blocks past that between Church and Castro and El Camino. Yeah.
That's important. Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Mr. Nunez?
Yep, thanks. So sorry if I missed this, but I just want to make sure I asked, is there a certain cutoff date or kind of like a retroactive point in time where if someone is rushing to get their application in because they see this coming down the pipe, is it possible for us to, if there isn't one already, to set like a retroactive date or to suggest or recommend one? I guess how that gets decided is a whole other matter. Yeah, just to make sure that there's no like huge rush of, like huge office applications coming in.
Right. So if you wanted to recommend a pipeline provision date, so a date that wherein somebody who has submitted an application would be allowed to proceed, we usually recommend putting that date, somewhat in the past, so that you're not creating this opportunity for somebody to submit a one-page piece of paper that has a chicken scratch on it and call that an application, and thereby be vested that way. As I said, the Smith Development did submit an application a couple of days ago on October 31st. So theoretically, if you wanted to exempt them, you could set an exemption date of, say, November 1st. Recommend that to council.
Cool. And sorry, I guess my question was: is there like a retroactive denial date, not exemption?
A retroactive denial date. I'm not sure I know what you mean.
Kind of like, so if you recall with rent control, when it kind of started and it got put on the ballot, there was a October 15th, 2015, I forget exactly, 2014, whatever it was, date that said, any rents increased after this date 12 months ago will revert back to market or to the original rent. Is there a date and sorry if I missed it, but is there a date we have in place that kind of says any new office applications submitted post November 1st, 2022 shall be deemed not acceptable or something like that?
Well, I see that our city attorney has raised her hand. I'll let her jump in if she has a point to make.
I was just going to say that the way that the exceptions are already structured would basically prevent applications that are pending from, right? They would still be subject to the cap if they're pending, but what Mr. Anderson said is that we have only one pending application for office development. Is that correct?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Right, because the current draft of the exceptions or exemptions is that entitled projects would be exempt, but if they're pending applications, they don't have their entitlements, they're not exempt. So in order to exempt them, you'd have to add another kind of pipeline provision. Awesome. But I know wasn't your interest.
Totally. All right. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Clark, other questions?
I have one more. Sorry. So I'm trying to play this all out in my head. So it sounds like there's the jobs housing piece, but there's also, it sounds like a primary concern is parking and state legislation that just went into effect. And so if we're putting this in place for 2 years, let's assume state legislation doesn't change in 2 years. Let's assume that we still can't charge in lieu fees, we still can't impose parking requirements, but we can pursue, the TDM, paid parking, whatever else comes out of the strategy. Presumably those will be ordinances that any new development would be subject to anyway. And it's going to take them 2 years to build anything anyway. So I guess I'm trying to figure out what we're getting out of this. If the state is saying that we can't charge in lieu fees or require have minimum parking requirements, and so our strategy to ensure that we aren't inundating the neighborhoods with parking, or that we have a solid strategy around this, whether it's paid parking or a modified neighborhood parking permit program. Whoever builds something is going to be subject to those presumably anyway. They're not, because they'll all be ordinances. But maybe I'm getting that wrong. So I'm just trying to figure out what we're getting here by capping development for 2 years.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing is really just about transparency and really making sure that developers know what they're getting into when they are applying for projects. I think one of the challenges with parking and the reason why we have parking regulations is because it's what they call a tragedy of the commons, where early users tend to fill up the available resource, and later users are crowded out. And I think the paid parking and everything like that is certainly meant in part to address that. But we also want to make sure that when developers are going through this process, they know what the future is going to hold. And likewise, we know when we are reviewing the project what the future is going to hold. There are a lot of complicated interplays for all of these things, and it's really best for us to be able to tell a coherent story, both to applicants as well as to the community, about how concerns and impacts are going to be addressed.
Thank you.
Vice Chair.
Just a couple questions. One was, when does council foresee that they're opening the gatekeeper process?
Oh, yeah, we have a website where we're saying, I think, fall 2023. So, I mean, that's obviously subject to change, but that's what we're saying now.
Okay, just curious. And the second part is Commissioner Clark had asked if the main sort of genesis for this was the parking and the new state laws. I guess I was looking at the jobs housing balance. I know that is a part of it, but how big is that in terms of what staff is trying to do here?
It was certainly a lot of discussion at the 590 Castro project, was a lot of that. I think as a part of the housing element too, the community is really interested in seeing housing in higher opportunity areas like downtown, places with a lot of resources and transportation opportunities and things like that. So I think all of this is kind of coming together in the community and in the conversations. It's hard to compare, but they're certainly both big issues.
Okay, and would this help us any with the arena, the housing element? I know we're submitting sort of second round. And I know this is not going to be finished before that, but just practically speaking, in reality, would this help us gain a larger buffer for even future?
Yeah, I mean, I think any housing that gets built is good for the arena, right? Because you're protecting yourself against no net loss in the future. So there's no question about that. Whether the housing element should effectively write in blood that we're going to do the downtown precise plan update and it's going to have these particular outcomes. I'll leave to a different meeting, but we'll any housing, like I said, is good for RENA.
It's going to be good, right? Okay, thank you.
Couple questions. So my recollection was that the downtown precise plan was proposed as a two-phase project in the goal plan for the current council, and based on staff's and the city manager's guidance, there was only bandwidth to do the first phase during this last 2-year cycle. Is that correct? And then, but phase 2 was still left on the table as something that could be or would be likely to be brought back in the future at that time, correct?
Yeah, although it was not actually adopted as part of the council work plan for this cycle. So phase 2 was not. So it was discussed as something that we could consider picking up in the future, but only phase 1 was actually adopted in the work plan.
Okay. And I thought that was because the manager and the staff didn't have the resources to work on phase 2 until after phase 1 was complete, correct?
Yeah, that's part of it. I know that there were probably other considerations. I know that council members wanted to make sure to take part in some of this, and I know that there was some, location conflict of interest concerns, but and so I think that may have been one reason why they focused on areas A, G, and H in phase one. But yeah, that certainly staff resources and other priorities is also always a consideration.
And phase one is slated to be done with.
We're gonna EPC has already recommended it. We're gonna bring it to council in 1 month, early December.
So at that point, the new council will start their goal planning for the next 2 years, and phase two could come back then.
Yep.
All right. Thanks. Any other questions before we go to public comment? All right, Joe. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Phone users can mute and unmute themselves with *6. The EPC clerk will start the timer and let you know when your time is up. Joe can you call our first speaker, please?
Okay. The first speaker is John Frawley.
John's on mute still.
John, you can speak now.
All right, go to the next speaker and we can come back to him.
Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah, you're still showing as on mute.
Okay, great. Now, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Thank you. That's funny. I was listening on the phone and I was not aware that I was raised my hand. Maybe it happened accidentally, but in any event, I feel comfortable talking. I'm an architect that's representing an owner on Castro, and we have been in the planning stages for an addition to his building, which would be affected by this this ordinance or this motion to change this and put a cap on buildings, office buildings. And our main comment, he was the one that wrote the letter to the planning commission about that it will affect our project because we were in the stages of early development and we were planning to submit it very soon, actually this month. Our problem is this kind of broadsided us, without knowing that it was coming up. It was just kind of, just as it was thrown at you unknowingly in the last week or so, without any awareness. And we wouldn't have gone as far as we've gone if we knew that we were not going to be able to, if there's going to be some type of time limit or pipeline limit on this. We're at the point which we can submit within a couple of weeks. We've got enough data to submit it, but we're going to be extremely penalized now for all the work that we've done up until this point to make improvements on this building. It's a historic building. We're going to be doing some rehabilitation of the building as well as addition to it. So we feel as though until this is actually approved by City Council, that we should have the opportunity to get our application in. And so the discussion in particular about having a pipeline restriction really greatly affects our ability to move forward. Because if you set the date of November 2nd, we're pretty much dead in the water at this point. And so I understand the concern that people would be handing in things on a napkin, but that's not the case. And I think the planning department will know if that's the case. So I want you to take that into consideration and to really, it will really greatly affect my client's investment in our time in designing the building that he cares so much about and is doing a very sensitive job and trying to enhance the downtown area with a little bit more office space and some retail space below. And this will add foot traffic, of course, and help the restaurants and those kinds of things. So anyway, those are my comments, and I'd like you to consider that pipeline question. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Next speaker is Connor Morales.
Hi, this is Connor Morales. I'm talking on behalf of myself and 9 other Morales family members. We do oppose this move for a cap on office space in downtown Mountain View, not only because the loss of vibrance in downtown Mountain View during the day. We really need to get people back into offices and just get foot traffic in downtown Mountain View recirculating and just bring more people into downtown. Another reason being, my family and I have owned multiple parcels of land in downtown Mountain View for decades, from the beginning, early 1900s. And my great grandmother moved here from Spain and worked so tirelessly hard to accumulate property in downtown Mountain View for the sake of her whole entire family. And she left these parcels of land with her daughter, my grandmother, who is now 96 or 92 years old and really wants to see a project that we've been working on for actually the last 15 years. And it was dropped in the past because there was a point where we weren't trusting of developers. We didn't have that professional background. I am a college graduate student and I'm 26 years old. And I'm now helping my family through a development process with a very trusted developer in downtown Mountain View for multiple parcels right off of Castro Street in Bryant in California. And we really want to see this project go up, and I really want my grandmother and all of her kids to see this happen. We've been working tirelessly hard on this for the past year, thousands of dollars in attorney fees to actually get to where we are. And we're so very close and working through our environmental steps for phase 1. And we want to see this beautiful building go up that will bring foot traffic back to Mountain View. My recommendation is that instead of an FAR limit of 0.35, we do a square foot limit of 50,000 square feet. So anything above 50,000 would not be permitted. Anything below 50,000 would be. And that is all I have to say. And that is my comment. Thank you for letting me speak.
Speaker, please.
Okay. Next person is Smith from Smith Development.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Perfect. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Len Smith, the principal with Smith Development. We've been working on applications to develop a property located at 705 West Dana that you guys have referenced tonight. It's with the mixed-use office project in Area H, the downtown precise plan. Our current application is based on a lot of feedback we've gotten from the community and city staff and also members of the city council. As you talked about it tonight, earlier this week, we submitted a formal application of a formal comment letter about the proposed temporary downtown precise plan cap, how it relates to our project. We understand that a main consideration for imposing the office cap is to address the downtown parking, particularly in light of the new parking legislation, AB 2097 that's been discussed tonight, that will come online in January, which may impact the city's ability to require the projects in close proximity to transit provide sufficient parking. Regardless of AB 2097, we are committed to fully parking our project both on site and within lieu fees, as we show in our application. Thus, tonight, if you proceed, please consider a fifth exception to the office cap for projects with pending applications that voluntarily fully park their project and or pay the in lieu fees, despite AB 2097. Our project has been in the pipeline actually since the beginning of 2019 informally, and then we submitted a formal application in late 2019. So it's been more than 3 years we've been in the process. But without the pandemic, we would likely be through the discretionary process and the city would not have to worry about the impact of AB 2097 or overflow parking as it relates to our project. However, because we propose to voluntarily fully park for the multi-use in our project, we will avoid the parking impact that's been discussed tonight. Unfortunately, if we are limited to 0.35 FAR, our project will not be economically feasible, and we'll have no choice but to leave the building abandoned and fenced off for the foreseeable future. In conclusion, we are hopeful you'll consider our suggested exception to the office cap, whereby if we voluntarily and fully park our project, we would not be subject to the office cap. Thanks for your time and attention. We welcome the opportunity to answer any questions you might have as well, if there's time for that.
Thank you. Speaker, please.
Next speaker is Christian Hansen. Christian, you can talk now.
Hi, commissioners. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. My name is Christian Hansen. I am a local property manager. We manage several commercial and retail properties in downtown Mountain View, downtown Palo Alto, downtown Menlo Park. And, you know, one thing that I've noticed during this conversation is, you know, most of the data that's being referenced seems to be, you know, backward looking rather than forward looking. I have the opportunity to look into our office buildings daily and see how these office users are using their spaces. And I will tell you that if there's a parking problem in downtown, it's not from office users. And I also don't see a problem with parking downtown now or over the past 2 years since the pandemic started. Most of these office spaces are at most 50% utilized. Most of these office tenants have gone to a hybrid model where they're no longer in the office full time. And this has really been a struggle for some of our retail tenants because they rely on our office tenants to patronize their restaurants and other retail stores during the day. At nighttime, I'm sure you know, if you go to downtown Mountain View, it's hopping. It's hard to find a parking spot. But during the day, you know, these restaurants really need help, and the way they get help is through these office tenants. So we have a very delicate ecosystem that relies heavily on office, and I don't know if that has necessarily been taken into consideration for this office cap. Like many of you have mentioned, this felt like it came kind of out of the blue and is backward looking. Forward looking, we are not going to see the same density in office that we've seen. I think that you could even say that, you know, the amount of people that are Ubering and as self-driving cars progress, we're going to need less parking. I think Mountain View is a forward-looking city, and we should stay forward-looking and not pull the rug out from those that, you know, even those, there are some people that are ready to submit an application like the Smiths that there's no reason why they shouldn't be part of an exception. But there's many others, like I think Morales' family just talked about. They've been working on their project for several months and years. And so anyway, I would propose that if it does go through, that you also extend the amount of time to get your application in. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Joe.
Next speaker is RCOX2. You can speak now.
That would be me. Now for something completely different. I'm Robert Cox speaking on behalf of the Steering Committee of Livable Mountain View. We strongly support the staff recommendation for the temporary cap on office development in the area of the downtown precise plan. On the 590 Castro Street project proposal, Sobrato insisted that since their proposal was precise plan conformant, the council must accept it, and they did. This sets a new bad precedent for future council decisions about downtown office projects. Precise plan all of the development parameters over which the council will have discretion to avoid a future similar situation. The temporary office cap would provide breathing room for that, and we urge the EPC to support it. We furthermore recommend that when the downtown precise plan does come back to the EPC, that the EPC consider to incorporate a jobs housing policy linkage similar to that which is adopted by the East Wispen precise plan. Mountain View needs to get its jobs housing imbalance under control. There have been serious consequences to that from San Francisco's RENA demands on our city, and the EPC and council must take direct and immediate action on the jobs housing imbalance to make the situation better. Since I have a minute and a half left, I'm going to comment on what some of the earlier speakers have said. I understand they have a strong desire to develop their properties. It's time to think differently and think residential rather than office and help solve the problem rather than make it worse. And the other thing, several years ago, Livable Mountain View did a study of the usage of these office complexes in terms of their employees going out and using the restaurants. And we found out that more often than not, the office people were bringing food in for their employees, and they were not patronizing the businesses. So I don't personally believe that that is a strong motivation to vote against the staff recommendation. And I strongly personally support it, and our organization does too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Speakers. Sorry, you're on mute.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Yes, good afternoon, commissioners and city staff. My name is Hala Al-Shawani. I would like to support staff recommendation that a moratorium would be placed on the office building permitting until the precise plan for downtown is updated. I have lived in Mountain View since 1984. I raised my kids here. I've lived in Cuesta Park, and I now live actually in downtown. I use the downtown every day, and downtown belongs to everyone, not just the folks that want to work or have jobs here. It should belong to everyone. And having office buildings along downtown that should really be enjoyed by all the Mountain View residents is really very disruptive, very uninviting. There will be a lot of dead space. And 590 Castro Street was a good example for that. Many public comments came in to oppose the height, the massive building, the massive underground parking, which is going to cause us to lose the beautiful heritage trees by Pioneer Park. It's going to block our view for the wonderful park that we've enjoyed for so long. It was very upsetting to see that project approved. And if we don't do anything about the precise plan as it currently is, we're going to have more and more of these projects, which will affect us all. And it's not fair. I invite all the property owners that gave input tonight that would like to contribute to the community and build their properties, as other people have said before me, to please consider residential building. We are in great need for that affordable residential building especially. I applaud the project that was discussed before that. It was wonderful to see all the things that they're trying to do with the 100% affordable housing. Why don't we do that instead? It's profitable for the owners, and it's wonderful for the residents of Mountain View, and it's going to be a lot more balanced with all the needs for housing that we have right now, and it will serve everyone. We should really think about all the people that live in Mountain View, not just the folks that own companies and are able to build these office buildings to serve themselves. Thank you, City staff. I support your recommendations, and I hope City Council will approve it as well. Thank you very much.
So
that's all the speakers raised hand. Yeah.
Then we will bring it back to the Commission for deliberation and action. Commissioner Nunes.
Great, thanks, Chair. So, yeah, I'm actually really glad that we're starting to make progress on this discussion. I'm gonna lower my hand. Yeah, it's unfortunate in terms of the way our society and market economy produces winners and losers, and not to ascribe that title to anyone in the community or present on this call or what have you, but that's just fundamentally the part of the dynamic of our economy here. And in terms of how the public governance structure, my view is that it's really intended to look out for what is benefiting the community. Should we do more of that? What's harming the community? How do we resolve that? How do we address that? How do we minimize the pain that people are experiencing on their day-to-day attempts at living and living well, right? And so I'm very clear on office development being a huge contributor to the affordable housing crisis that we've had for so many years. The amount of office development and growth that cities around the Bay Area have experienced over the last 2 decades is significant. It's beyond significant. It is hugely and grossly outpaced the amount of residential development because the profits also are far greater. And so there's no right to make a maximal amount of return on an asset that we are guaranteed in life, right? And so I think it's unfortunate for like individually for the people who were on this call and have these projects that they would like to bring to term. I can't say I understand what that's like, but I can imagine the disappointment and the upsetness that you might be feeling. But I think our role is to look at what is actually not just the community asking for, but what's the underlying need and the reason why they're asking for that. And so me personally, I'm extremely glad to support this staff recommendation. I have lots of ways that I think we could do something even more, like, I guess, forceful in terms of tackling this issue and our jobs housing imbalance. And I don't think that's in the scope of this discussion. I'm gonna very strongly and gladly support this temporary approach to addressing this problem. I hope that my colleagues on the commission can also support this and just kind of try and imagine for how long we've skewed so much in one direction when it comes to land development in our city and what the impacts of that have been, the downstream impacts, the negative externalities of increased homelessness. I hope that that's something that we factor in. What are the broader negative costs that our city is incurring by not doing this? opposed to, maybe the individual costs that, land development might incur by not being able to develop within a certain time frame. So I'm happy to consider to support this, and yeah, I appreciate staff's work on this. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Clark.
And so I have a different perspective, and I wish I didn't. I wish I genuinely believed that, sort of changing direction here would lead to, a complete shift in, from what I think is not an unreasonable density of office to high density housing. But the reason that I don't, I'm a little hesitant here is a lot of the folks who are calling for a cap so that we can redo the plan in order to focus more on housing, and who say that they wish, for example, the Serato project would have been housing. I see a lot of the, in terms of the letters that have come in, I see a lot of the same folks who have opposed high density housing downtown, a number of projects. And it would not surprise me if Serato were a 7-story apartment project or condo project to have the exact same complaints that we have with Serato, the underground parking taking out the trees, the building being too tall and too dense. And yes, there's ground floor retail that invites people in, but I'm not buying that. And in my mind, jobs housing that's a citywide thing, that's a region-wide thing, and we should absolutely do our part. But different parts of our city have sort of micro economies within them, whether it's San Antonio, whether it's downtown. Downtown is supported during the day by folks who come in. Yes, some folks come in to have lunch at the restaurants and to visit whatever service providers are there. But by and large, the daytime population is composed of folks who are there to be at the office, and now it's more like 3 days a week instead of 5, and there's more vacancies. And yes, those folks, at least pre-pandemic, create a lot of parking issues, and some of the larger tenants may bring in their own food. But I think we tend to focus on the really large tenants who have the capability to do that, and not the 30,000 square foot startup that doesn't have the budget to cater food. When we had 25,000 square feet of office near downtown, we brought in food from the restaurants. Granted, we didn't send our people out for an hour every day to restaurants. We catered it all in from local restaurants. And I think, I feel like a lot of these concerns I feel like we're doing something we typically don't do in Mountain View. When state laws have changed, when we've said we really want to change course, for example, in North Bay Shore, and add housing, we didn't freeze everything. We didn't say that, we didn't cap everything, suddenly. We said we didn't change the rules on people. We said, follow the existing rules until we have the new rules in place. And I think the only time I've seen us do something like that was cannabis, which was more like, we're going to put a moratorium on dispensaries, which was basically status quo until we can craft our own regulations, right? I can't recall a period or a recent example of us sort of changing the rules to deal with state legislation or to deal with concerns that came out of a specific development project that was met all whether we like it or not, met all of the requirements of the downtown precise plan. So I guess what I'm getting at here is I'm very torn because I don't believe this is the right way, this is not the traditional way that we handle these sorts of problems in Mountain View. We've tended to be not change the rules of the game on folks while we sort things out. We've been very forthcoming and had a public process to make these sorts of changes. And I'm trying to weigh like the benefits that we get of this, which I understand. Like the reason I'm torn is because staff is recommending this. And for those of you who know me well, like I'm usually very deferential to staff, but I'm really struggling here with the way that the timing of this, the way it's been crafted, and searching for some other way to do this. And I don't know if it's to say that any application that comes in that is fully parked or meets all the current requirements up until January 1 is allowed to proceed. And maybe these requirements kick in on January 1 with the new state law. I don't know if that also means that those applicants can then go back and revise their application to remove those requirements, or if they'd have to submit a new one, then obviously that then what I propose might work. But I just feel like I also can't come up with proposals like that on the spot. But I guess what I'm getting at here is I think this is too blunt of an approach. And if there were truly a major jobs housing implication here, which I don't think the city, frankly, is ready for. I would be shocked if folks are very comfortable with 7 and 10 story, residential projects in downtown in place of some of these office parcels that would actually have a meaningful impact on the jobs housing imbalance in the district that we're talking about, versus what I think will ultimately end up happening, which is basically we're sort of trying to freeze things in time and minimize the developable potential of a lot of areas of downtown, which I think would be unfortunate. So anyway, I've said my piece. I'm very torn here. I don't think this is the right approach. I'm open, but I also understand staff's concerns here in trying to make sure that we have a path forward to put some of the ordinances and a new framework in place that everyone can abide by and everyone knows is there sort of as they're signing up for submitting a development application. So I don't know how I get myself out of this, but those are my thoughts right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Hammer.
Thank you, and I really, Commissioner Clark, you took a lot of my thoughts and said them before I could. Like you, I appreciate the attempt on behalf of staff to really be responsive to what they've heard in regard to a recent project. And I tend to generally defer to the staff recommendation. I don't think this is the right instrument. And I think it feels a little rushed, and it feels like a piecemeal approach. It doesn't feel like the kind of comprehensive planning that we've done. And I think particularly in the downtown, I think some of what we're seeing, as one of the public commenters mentioned, some of it is just the nature of hybrid work, right? I don't know that our office vacancies can be attributed to an abundance of office in downtown. And so I think the last time we took this up, I was the lone voice in saying, I would much rather have office downtown than empty retail. And I think we need office to sustain the retail. And I would really like to see I'd like to take the precise plan up. And I think Commissioner Dempsey, you alluded to this earlier about if this is the urgency, then we should really do this comprehensively. And I don't know what the coming economic cycle of the next 2 years will bring, but it feels wrong to me to penalize projects that might be in the pipeline, two that sound like they're very close and one that's already been submitted. So I'm torn. I don't know that the parking issue is really what I see as the most pressing, and compliance with state law is the pressing urge for that. And I'm not totally sure that restricting future office growth is going to help save retail. So I'd love to hear what others say, but I think I'll be in the same camp as Commissioner Clark and reluctant to support this, even though I think what we are trying to work toward is a greater balance of jobs and housing. It's close. Downtown is close to transit. It's close to a lot of services. If you're going to put office somewhere, you want it to be in an area that's rich and vibrant and can build off of the existing infrastructure that's already there. And I'm not sure I see high density residential coming. I'd love to, if that is the reality, but that just hasn't been what I've been tracking. So really curious to hear more from others, but that's where I am at this moment.
It's really hard to follow Commissioners Haymeyer and Clark, because I think they just said very eloquently what kind of what I was thinking. And I'm really torn on this one. This one's hard. This is probably one of the hardest ones I've seen all year for me personally. And I think for me, I feel a couple of different ways. I think on process, I'm a little concerned. I do feel like this is a little bit of a rush job and it sort of fell out of the sky. Because a development cap like this, that's a pretty big change of state. That's not a small remedy. That's a big deal. And I feel like I'm getting rushed into something that's a really big deal. Not only because it's a pretty big remedy for the folks that'll impact, but this is the beginning of a much larger conversation, I think, that we're going to end up having in Mountain View about how are we going to solve the jobs housing imbalance. That's a huge question. It's huge. And it has some really interesting, significant implications for the rest of the city. And I feel like we're kind of just jamming through it. And that doesn't sit well with me. That's a big part of why I'm struggling. I mean, this didn't even come to us as a formal request of the council, I don't think. This didn't even have a study session attached to it. I think if we just had a study session, I would have felt a little bit more prepared. And frankly, I think for something this important, the community perhaps deserves a little bit more due process and more chance to talk about it. And that's, so that part hurts. Now, I will say conversely, the concerns about how this newly passed assembly bill might impact our ability to have parking solutions downtown, that's not a small issue. That I take that very seriously. When Livable Mountain View raises this as an issue, I listen to that. Like, you don't want a parking apocalypse downtown. And so I get why there is urgency and concern. I totally get it. And downtown is special. Its health right now is fragile. We have a lot of empty businesses downtown. And I think downtown needs more care than it's gotten. I would like us to approach the downtown precise plan and revising it, dealing with the parking plan for down there with a little bit more urgency, because I worry about downtown. And I want it to get the attention that it deserves, because right now it's struggling. My gosh, what else would I even want to say? I guess I'm going to sit here and listen to everybody else before I decide how I'm going to vote, but I will say this. Going forward, regardless of what our recommendation is or however I vote, my hope is that to the council, we would ask, first of all, that we put a higher priority on going back and doing all the planning that we need to do for downtown and put a little bit more urgency behind that. And second, if we do go forward with this plan, my hope is that we would consider, or council would consider, some type of grace period for the potential applicants that are very, very close to being able to apply, because what I don't want is for property owners who've been trying to do the right thing to feel whipsawed by kind of instant changes in state. That's not fair. And property owners and people too, we got to treat everybody fairly. That's a really core part of what cities need to do. So those are the two things I'd ask for. Thanks for listening.
Yep. Vice Chair Yin.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this one is interesting. And I can understand sort of what makes it very, very tough. Some of the same questions that others have brought up, I've been thinking about as well. And if we just go back a little, when it comes to the jobs housing balance alone, I wish we could put a sort of little temporary breather on the whole city, just so we can sort of catch up and figure out what we could do to get that all in check. But that's not what we're talking about now. And I understand why downtown might be a little different, why they've focused on this. One may be because the precise plan is coming. I'm hoping it is. I really feel like it's much more effective if we are looking at the precise plan sooner rather than later, so that it's sort of in tandem with this. We're making the best use of the time. And also just to take a breath and look at everything else that staff has mentioned. If I don't look at like individual owners, property owners, I sort of have the question about our downtown right now, if we're just looking at jobs housing, is already skewed so much towards office, and so much of the office is vacant. In general, I'm not sure why we're developing more office then in that case. It just doesn't, compute a little bit for me if we're just looking at the broader scope of what we've got. If we have such vacancy, then maybe what we should also be doing for the downtown, since we're looking at how to bring businesses back and such and so forth, is to figure out how to fill those vacant office spaces first before we develop more of it, which would throw our jobs housing balance specifically in downtown off way even more. And I feel like for the last years, maybe it's just because it's habitual at this point, we're always playing catch up to all the changes and everything that's going on that's coming out of the state. We're like scrounging for funding everywhere just to get some affordable housing. Even when we do market rate ones, we're getting such a small percentage. And then now with state laws, we can't double dip, obviously, as we're learning. And so it just feels like it's become the new norm, where we're like discussing the little tidbits of how to get tiny bits of affordable housing and spending tons of millions of dollars from the city to do the 1 or 2 affordable housing, 100% affordable housing units. And it's not to, I don't want to take away what property owners can do, but this is temporary. I mean, as we've seen, so many projects take years anyways. It's just to allow a little bit of time for the city and the staff to just assess where we are, try to standardize it so that we're back to a point where we can say, hey, these are the rules, and this is what we're looking for as a community and as a city. We took a little time, we're concentrating on this. Here they are. So developers, come please, and send in your proposals, and it can be done a little bit maybe more expeditiously if the rules are laid out to begin with. Developer knows what they are and they just follow it. It just is more efficient. So given that the precise plan for downtown is so old, it's like early 80s, I believe. If we can get the downtown precise plan done soon, I can see that this is good timing, and I would be all for it. I just think that a breather would be great. It's not to say, let's not do anything. It's temporary, and we're not taking away what people can do now. We're not even taking away the ability to do some office. We're just saying, okay, let's just do a tiny little pause. Now, I totally understand why some people who are almost finished, they were ready to submit, and they haven't, they didn't know this was coming. Maybe staff and council together could figure out what that deadline is. I don't know what that is. I don't know what, staff has already talked to with other applicants, and whether or not you're going to get, chicken scratch, pencil behind off the napkin kind of sketches in and say, here, we're proposing this. So I don't know where that deadline would fall, but I leave it up to staff and council to figure that out. But I'm generally for this idea. In broad terms, I think it's a good idea to just truly assess, take stock of where we are, put rules in place that it goes back to, holistically looking at things. And right now we've just been scrambling. This would be a chance to at least take a breath and look holistically at least this little tiny part of our city. Thanks.
Commissioner Gutierrez.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with a majority of the comments have been shared already. I'm not going to repeat that, but I will emphasize the difference, right? And at this point, there was no formal request by the City Council to have this be something that we looked at from their vantage point. But my experience says that when staff recommends something, we should look into that. And having heard Vice Chair's perspective on a temporary pause and why, I completely agree with that perspective, right? And I think when you look at it holistically, this is the role that we play right now as EPC members. But we also see the value that City Council takes into consideration when they deliberate about these types of issues also at their level and in that formal process. So it's important to at least look at this as an opportunity to just take a breather. It's for a set period of time so that possibly city council and whoever comes in, or if the group stays the same, can then, I'm thinking this is more like an ask of time for them to be able to explore this step by step, hoping that also the council in general will look at everything in general that needs to be re-examined as a packet, right? But that's not my job, right? I am not city council, I am EPC. And, you know, in this case, I understand both sides of the issue, but I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to the staff because I don't think that would lead us in a direction that would be negative as a whole. I think it's more of a, hey, we need a timeout here so that we can try and figure out these things at the next level, which is your city council colleagues, and possibly how that's going to be dealt with in the future. And then we can come back, lift up this temporary cap, and then move forward. So I'm trusting in the process right now for that. That's what I'm listening to, and I'll be in support of staff's recommendation. Thanks.
Commissioner Nunez?
Absolutely, and I just want to, you know, say for making my own comments, how much I do appreciate Commissioner Yin and Gutierrez's viewpoints on this as well, especially with regards to that temporary nature of this proposal, again, as a means to give us some space to understand, you know, how we can approach things a little bit more holistically in the city. And so one of the, you know, just in terms of speaking to people's open-mindedness about this, as I kind of heard some of my colleagues mention, I'll say this, let's consider that, you know, there is such a thing as, you know, an appeal to tradition, that, you know, because things have been done a certain way before, you know, and that can be a variety of things. Personal traditions, you know, are enjoyable and warm, and, you know, we enjoy them. But when it comes to governance and to, you know, like large macro level, you know, kind of trends and how that percolates down into the everyday lives of people in our communities, that really ought not to be left up to tradition or in general how things have been done before. How things have been done before has led us to this point where we're at right now, where, yeah, as Commissioner Yin noted, there's almost this sensation of, you know, trying to scrap for morsels of affordable housing, and that does need to change. How we go about making that change needs to be innovative, it needs to be new. We need to figure things out because how we've approached it in the past has continued to produce inadequate results for the community at large. So I would suggest, consider, ask, whatever, you know, that we consider not necessarily basing our decisions in that kind of traditional methodology. The second point I wanted to make here is, you know, I'm personally not in favor of finding ways to make exemptions or to minimize them with regards to, you know, any kind of like new applicants or applications, not already, you know, basically whatever staff has recommended. Anything outside of that, I'm personally not very supportive of that. Again, it's unfortunate, but making that kind of exemption now is just choosing to add more load onto the problem that I think an initiative like this gives us the breathing space to try and resolve. So those are my comments, and I would iterate support again for the staff recommendation.
I'm going to raise my hand. So this was, it doesn't feel like there's a simple answer here to me. A couple initial thoughts. this House bill doesn't go away if we pass this and council passes this. That parking restriction is there no matter when it is. I'm skeptical of one small precise plan being the solution to our jobs housing balance. When I saw this, what I heard during the discussion around 590 was, what do we want our downtown to be? And that to me is the precise plan. Precise plan is old. It was written at a time when councils had a lot of discretion, and the state has done a lot to remove discretion from city councils over time. Same time, I'm also a very big believer in, if somebody follows the rules, then damn it, they should be able to do that. And this idea of changing something here at the last minute without a path to completion really bothers me. When we did the commuter precise plan, and I was not on the commission at the time, I was an observer. One of the things that I found very frustrating was all of the gatekeepers that occurred during the development of the precise plan. In fact, what ended up happening, in my view, was that the gatekeepers became the way the precise plan was developed, instead of the precise plan being the way it was developed. If this was being proposed as a item that was in conjunction with a decision by council to take the next step and do step B plan, the phase 2 of the downtown precise plan, then this would make a lot of sense to me, because it would be some kind of we're going to put things on hold, but now there's a very definitive plan in place for coming up with what do we want downtown to be? What is this supposed to be going forward? The fact that the phase 2 of the precise plan is not a goal at this point, is not something that is in place by staff, a staff priority, to me says this is premature. If this was something, and if it was something and it was proposed in conjunction with the phase 2 of the downtown precise plan, then this would make sense to me. But right now, it feels too early. It feels unfair to the landowners that have been playing by the rules. And quite frankly, there is a lot of vacant office space downtown. Are we going to get some additional office space built? Maybe, but I'm not. I work in San Francisco, and vacancy rates in San Francisco are still astronomical. The net population in the Bay Area is in fact negative. People are leaving. It doesn't mean there's still not a housing problem, but I'm not expecting that all of a sudden, because AB 2089 goes into effect, that there's going to be this rash of office space being built downtown. But this doesn't feel fair to me, to the people that have been playing by the rules so far. So Commissioner Clark, your timeline to me is, this would go into effect when council votes to approve a work plan item for phase 2 of the downtown precise plan. There's some variant of this that says during the development of the precise plan, we're not going to allow, gatekeepers and other radical changes, but doing this independently of a downtown precise plan feels disconnected to me, and it feels unfair to the landowners that are there today. And it's also unfair because I agree, Commissioner Clark. I don't think people would have been excited with a 7-story apartment complex, housing development in that corner either. So I think the question that came out of that discussion was, what do we want downtown to be? And I don't know that we know that at this point. And this feels premature. So I'm reluctant to support this at this time, but taking this to council and saying, something like this in conjunction with a decision to move forward with phase 2 of the downtown precise plan would make sense, would be something that it would make sense to me to communicate to council. So that's my opinion. Commissioner Clark.
Yeah, I agree with you. There is an aspect to it that I do want to respect too, and that I actually agree with the staff, Livable Mountain View, and others, which is the legislation taking effect in January 1. I totally get like not wanting a rush of applications that don't have sort of any respect for our existing regulatory framework in terms of in lieu fees or parking minimums or other things. So I do think if something's done here, it probably does need to coincide with that. And just briefly to address Commissioner Nunez earlier comments, like it's not about tradition for me. I'm actually someone who doesn't really care for tradition that much. It's more about good governance, and it would be one thing if these were like large corporate landlords, but from my experience downtown, a lot of these are these are folks who are either part of the community or have been part of the community for generations, or these parcels have been passed down for generations. They aren't huge, they're individual families, as we heard from some speakers earlier. And, they feel part of the community, and I feel like they're, most of them have been good partners to us in the past, and they've worked with us through boom times and recessions, and not all of them are purely self-interested. And so I do think that we owe a duty of care to not just change the rules. Rent control was one thing that was a debate that was raging for a very long time. There were a number of proposals put forth over years. People were thinking about it. This sort of just reared its head after an office application. And granted, it had been festering for a while, and there was state legislation that sort of came as part of it too. But it's just very rare for us to change the rules on folks on short notice, and sometimes there may be good reasons for that. But that to me is not about tradition. It's about being a good governing body and respecting our not just our residents, but our partners in the community who help make our community thrive. So I guess I have a question for staff, and just tell me if this isn't feasible, but I mean, is there some way that we could allow folks who want to submit compliant or applications that are compliant with the current downtown precise plan, for example, through the end of the year, and have those processed? Could we do that, or would they then have or could they just simply revise those applications based on the new state law after January 1 and be able to do that? My assumption would be they would have to withdraw and resubmit, in which case, then our new rules here would apply and they wouldn't be able to take advantage of that state law. But I guess what I'm trying to figure out is if there's some way to allow someone who's, fully complying with our existing rules in terms of parking lieu fees, or fully parking their project, to proceed up until the point where this state law kicks in, which I think I share that concern with a lot of the members of the community and staff and council here too.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll try to answer it, but then I think city attorney might need her confirmation on this or not. But my understanding is that we would not be able to enforce any provision of parking after January 1st. So that means if somebody came in and, their submittal on December 5th had, 2 levels of underground parking, then we approved it, in the next year or something like that, then if they came in with a building permit, we would not be able to enforce that on the building permit. Is that correct, Sandy, or I just want to confirm?
I think alternatively, so this is a new law, so we're still kind of grappling with how it's going to work in practice. But to the extent that they may have to come in for a development, the amendment to the development permit, but the city would not be in a position to deny that amendment, because the city can't enforce or impose parking minimums on parcels that are within a half mile of a major transit stop.
Understood. And so I guess I have a second part to that, which is, is there some way for us to, I'm thinking in my head, like, I don't care that much about additions, or, if you have a historic building and you're adding onto it, maybe it's somewhat more than 0.35 FAR, but maybe we don't necessarily want another, empty parking lot to develop into a large office during this period. I'm probably just overcomplicating things, but I'm just wondering if there's some way to sort of carve out, basically say, like, look, what we really don't want here is like an empty parcel or a cleared parcel to become a primarily, an office building, maybe with some ground floor retail, but primarily office above 0.35. But we don't really care that much if you're redeveloping an existing parcel and you're not scraping it, and you're preserving most of what's there and you're just adding some additional office. But maybe that's too difficult to carve out in the short period that we have in the next 60 days. But that was my other thought.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that if that's the consensus from the EPC, however you want to put those ideas together, we can endeavor to turn that into, a concrete standard to present to council. That's the EPC's recommendation.
Got it. Okay. Well, I think just for others' benefit, like the place where I've sort of landed is I'm comfortable with something going into effect to sort of give us time to figure out what we're going to do about how this relates to parking and other things. But I would hope that, and I think we should recommend that the council take the step to prioritize phase 2 of the downtown precise plan as part of this. They can, it's one thing to prioritize, it's another to schedule, whether they decide to, make themselves a note to ensure that this is, top of the list when they consider their goal setting for whoever's on the new council. And in the spring, like, that would be sufficient for me, but I wouldn't want to like do this and then like kick the can down the road in terms of them, in terms of everyone determining sort of to prioritize this. And then the other piece would be trying to find some way to allow those who might want to, whether it's setting a November 1 cutoff or setting the cutoff to whenever the council hearing is. I don't know what the right answer there is, but I just want to take into account the folks who have generally been working pretty hard on applications and might be impacted at this by the last minute.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Yeah, Chris actually mentioned a lot of other points that I had planned to speak about. So thank you, Commissioner Clark, on that. But I think the important thing to remember here, though, too, is if we can carve in some sort of exception for those who are not sobrato, because I think that's what happened from a layman's perspective. Big company comes in, sobrato comes in. I love them, right? I mean, alumni from Santa Clara, very active in the community, have given back to those in need throughout Santa Clara County and the Bay Area as a whole. I get it, but this one project was really a bad taste in everyone's mouths, right? And because of that, all the little people who are not massive owners of production or owners of a big company like Sobrato are paying the price for it. And that's not fair, right? So if there's any way that we can use council to bring in language, if it's feasible enough, to be specific to those current owners of parcels in Mountain View, then I think that's very different from just, I think that goes to the point of comparing them to a vacant lot where anything maybe can go, right? So I leave that into Sandy's perspective in terms of finding the language to be specific enough to be impactful with what we're trying to achieve, understanding the reason why this is even brought to us in the first place. And I think when Eric mentioned to me that they're trying to be proactive, for me, that was a part of good governance. And governing isn't easy, it's messy. And sometimes you come into these issues where you hear both sides of the issue and you understand both perspectives. But when staff also comes into play and says, hey, this is why we think we can do this and why we should do this, it goes to that issue of being in good governance mode, because we have been behind the 8 ball for the last 5-8 years with, for whatever reason, many issues. When the state says something, then we have to catch up. And if the team's trying to say, hey, here's an opportunity, though it's small in nature, it's still going to have an impact on everyone involved. Let's take the time to do the timeout now because we think it's worth it. So having heard what Commissioner Clark had mentioned and combining these perspectives as a whole from the EPC, I can see us agreeing to something like this and then moving forward with a recommendation with these caveats. Thanks.
Mr. Dempsey.
So, like many of my colleagues, I think everybody, I'm feeling a bit split about it. I think that this is an important conversation. I think some of the concerns about what could happen downtown are well-founded. However, process is important and fairness is important. I'll just tell you what I wish would happen. What I wish would happen is I wish staff could just take in the conversation that we had tonight, go back to the drawing board, and then in 2 weeks, come back with, a staff memo that's a little bit evolved, that has a couple of options in it, that lets us decide, well, should it be 0.35 FAR? Should it be 50,000 square feet? Maybe it's a third thing. And, maybe, bake in some very reasonable exception for folks that are just about there. And then we could vote on it, and it would have been out in the public. It wouldn't feel like it fell out of the sky. It's been getting some due process. There's time for people to send us letters and tell us it's a great idea, we're full of it, or whatever. But in my ideal world, that's actually what I'd like to see happen. Because I don't know that we need to rush to get something into the council's hands tomorrow morning. I don't think we have to do that. I think maybe we could take a little bit more time to really bake this and think this through, because I'd rather give them a fully baked pie rather than a bag full of ingredients.
So I guess, Mr. Clark, what are you proposing? I will say that anything that doesn't allow some kind of grace period for current donors, I would not support. I don't know, but I'm not exactly sure what you are kind of proposing as something else. And I to a certain extent agree with Commissioner Dempsey that I'd like to see something different, but I don't know that we're the right place to come up with the answer to that at this point. So you talked around a framework, but I'm not sure what I'd be voting on is what I'm not clear on.
Yeah, well, that's fair. That was my hired brain trying to figure out something on the fly. But I do think, and Eric, tell me if you disagree. If staff worked really hard on this and their recommendation is what they presented to us, I think that should be one of the options for council to consider. They've made good arguments in the staff report. So I think if it were me, presenting it to council, I think what I'd say was, here's the staff recommendation. The EPC had some concerns about it. We still recommend it, but here are some of the concerns that EPC had, and here's how we might be able to address them. One being, providing a grace period for folks to apply, and here are some options for those dates. You can set it to the original public notice date, like what is currently being proposed now. You can set it to maybe today, this meeting date that we had on November 2nd, or you could set it to be the council meeting date or a date at the end of the year. I don't know what the right answer is, and I think there are probably some things that the city attorney's office should probably look at as part of that. But I think, so one concern would be, providing some sort of grace period. I think the other would be that, at least my concern was, I'm much more concerned about, after January 1, someone submitting, a significant, a high FAR proposal for a vacant site or a site that's going to be scraped than I am, someone making some modifications to an existing structure, doing some additions, those sorts of things. I don't know how, I don't know how to better state that, but I think what we don't want in the next, during this period where we're developing phase 2 of the precise plan, is another high FAR purely office project, right? Maybe with ground floor retail, but still, that's sort of that, but that doesn't have any parking provisions or anything. I think that's really what we're trying to get at here, and I don't know how to better word that. But I think those are the two primary primary concerns that I have is some sort of grace period. I don't know what the right date is. I think there are probably legal implications for choosing that right date. And then the other would be if the council wants to provide a little bit of leniency around additions or add-ons, and instead wants to sort of really target vacant or sites that could be scraped. But then you also have to craft that language, which I feel bad about staff having to figure out. Those are the two big things. I think this sort of came out of, this was pretty short notice, those sorts of things, that's water under the bridge at this point. So I don't, and I do generally feel like we do need to do something by January 1, just given the state law there and being able to develop our ordinances. So that's where I'm at. I'm not sure if that helps, Eric, but maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But
Vice Chair Yin, or Eric, did you want to respond to that? Or
no, I think that's that direction is something that we can work with. I think as other commissioners speak, maybe we might have to kind of further refine that direction. But I don't have any thoughts or questions or comments on it.
Vice Chair Yin.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to jump in there to try to help craft something too. And it's very similar to what Commissioner Clark was saying. I do think it would be a good idea to note to council that prioritizing phase 2 would be important to us, if everyone else agrees. I also think that, as I said earlier, that the exceptions, and I was going to leave to council and staff, and to sort of tweak that a little bit and just give a little bit more detail. And maybe Sandy, you'll have something to say to this, because I don't understand the legal aspects and repercussions at all. Maybe by the date council sees this, and I don't know if staff can do this, see how many applications come in and what they are, and just present them as they are. So by today's date, as staff has made the recommendation, these are the projects that would be affected. If more end up coming in, I don't know how much time staff takes to do it, but just draw a map of where they are, what the proposal is generally, like how large it is, and what either the jobs housing balance would be off by this much, or, just the sort of key data points very quickly, and compare this date, the date of council meeting, and maybe some other one that you feel is key, and let council then see what the repercussions are, and they can choose out of 3 dates. what they feel is best. That's all I've got. Sorry, I don't know if that helps, but maybe just presenting it that way might help.
Commissioner Gutierrez.
Great idea, Vice Chair. Yeah, that's great. I like that because at least the council then has the option. Well, no, not the option, but the council can then look at the immediate impact of how this would affect those that are in waiting and who have just applied or will apply. And so that gives them a better holistic perspective of the impact to such a short-term cap. The other thing, though, is, Eric, I don't know if you know this or not, but I've got to ask, and Sandy as well, in terms of capacity. If you were to have these types of suggestions added on to what we're discussing now, and we were to incorporate this into the resolution, the staff recommendation, I'm wondering if that's the ideal point, or if there's enough time, as it was suggested before by Commissioner Clark and others, to go back and then bring this back. I'm not sure that there's enough time because we only have, I believe, one meeting in November, right? And then I think there's only another meeting in December for us. But then council's schedule is jam-packed as far as I know. So if we're working on a tight timeline so that they can have something in full, so that we can accommodate what they're doing to review things before the end of the year, then we may not have enough time to have you beef this up, bring it back with option 1, staff recommendation 2 and 3, but rather just do the markup now as we discuss this and then move that forward. Is that scenario what I'm describing right now? Which of those two do you think would be best for us to approach?
So let me respond to both what you said and the recommendation from the Vice Chair. Regarding what you said, I think ultimately what we would have to do is take the recommendation to council. Now the EPC can, as part of the recommendation, say, we think this is premature, and so we don't think you should adopt this right now. But in the next few months, after doing more outreach or doing more analysis or doing more whatever, we can come back and ask this question again. So that can be part of the EPC's recommendation. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that seems like kind of the direction that you were going. Regarding Vice Chair Yin's option, I'm not sure that that's possible. What you're saying is that somebody could actually submit an application the morning of the council meeting, and then the staff would have to present that application that night at the council meeting. And that's kind of an extreme example, but really the analysis and report preparation time is it's not immediate, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons why we have a month between EPC and council meetings. And it's very difficult to include a significant amount of additional analysis, especially the closer and closer you get to the council meetings. And so we would expect that anybody who would be wanting to submit an application would want to take as much time as possible to do so. And so it would be a very, very difficult for us to present a set of applications to council and have them make a determination on a cutoff based on that.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay, so I have a quick follow-up then, Eric. So if that option isn't available for City Council to review applications up to said deadline time, including the date of when this is going to be discussed at that moment with City Council, I don't know what you heard from my suggestion. I'm not sure we understood each other that clearly. My point was more, if we're going to mark up the recommendation now, because we don't have enough time for you to go back and make this prettier, I just want to know that. And I think I heard your answer saying that we don't have enough time.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. So I think based on that, based on the items that were brought up by the commissioners as a whole, I think Sandy has a good amount of understanding of what type of language we're looking for the restrictions or the exceptions that we'd like to look at and add on to the recommendation as points of interest for council to review. Does that make sense?
Well,
They're
I've
nodding.
heard a lot of things, but I don't know what a majority of the EPC is going to support. So I need to hear a motion with kind of the bullet points of what you would like. I mean, it could be you move the staff recommendation, you know, with an additional exemption for a pipeline provision to exempt projects that have submitted an application by such and such a date. And any of the dates actually that you've floated could potentially work. I mean, I don't think there's a legal problem with any of them. No one will be vested anyway for an office project. So, and then if there's other bullet points you want to add to the motion, then we'll see. And then we may be able to work with that to craft language.
Well, that's wonderful, because now at least we all have a framework from what you need from us to be able to figure that out. Right. So that's key, to be able to figure out, okay, what does Sandy need to move this forward? So I would agree with Commissioner Clark's perspective early on with the 2 points that he made. Now, I don't know what the other commissioners think, so maybe now's a good time to find out. Do you all like that perspective or in favor of that, or would you want to change that in general?
Quick question, Sandy. Would this require a second reading?
Does it require a second reading? Is that what you said, Mr. Chair? No, it doesn't, because it's an amendment of the precise plan, which is done by resolution. So it doesn't require a second reading.
This would go into effect the day that they would vote in favor of it.
Correct.
Okay. Which right now is tentatively set for December 6th.
No, generally these resolutions go into effect 30 days later. We have an effective date for the resolutions.
Oh, you put an effective date in there? Okay, because resolutions can be effective upon adoption. I don't know is that for precise plans specifically?
Yeah, let me, I'll double check that just a second.
I guess what I'm getting at is taking on what Commissioner Clark talked about, which is picking a date, okay? And the idea of giving them multiple choice, I'm not a big fan of that, but I would either it's the date that you know, that the grace period goes up until December 6th, or if it's goes into effect 30 days later, it's any project submitted up until January 6th. But I'm not comfortable with now or yesterday kind of a thing. So if Commissioner Clark is open to something like that, I would be more inclined to something that was linked to the date that council votes on it and when the thing goes into effect, so that there's some period of time. If the 6th, it would give roughly 30 days from now. If it was 30 days after that, or December 31st, that's fine. But I think there needs to be some kind of a time frame. And if thinking about what Commissioner Clark said, if it's something in the staff report, it says small changes associated with building upgrades, government-owned property, blah, blah, blah. If there was and the one before is improving and place buildings, but not to add office space greater than 3.5 FAR, that could be, it sets some specific square footage limit that might, maybe that would address the Commissioner Clark's concern and my concern at the same time, or something. So if it's, you know, upgrades to property, something with the same property, and remove the parking lot demolition, you know, the building on a parking lot approach. I don't know how clear I was there, but something that something along that line that says, you know, if they're approving a space, upgrading existing space, expanding something that's already there within within some number, within the precise plan. I think like I said, the precise plan allows up to 0.4, is what you said earlier, Eric. So if it was within that guideline and on upgrading an existing building or something like that, then that would make some sense. Then that would make more sense to me. Commissioner Clark.
Yeah, so it sounds like it would be the staff recommendation with 3 additional points. One would be that the EPC recommend that the council prioritize phase 2 of the downtown precise plan review and update alongside the adoption of this resolution, or very soon thereafter. You know, at minimum with a note to prioritize it at their goal setting. But anyway, I think the first position would be, you know, in concert with adopting the resolution, that they also prioritize phase 2 of the downtown precise plan update process as soon as possible. Two, that the council, that the EPC recommends that there be a pipeline provision. I think you can basically present to council the applications that you've received up through the point where you're comfortable, you know, including them in the staff report that goes out, you know, as of the time that you issue the staff report. And maybe, you know, my personal view is that the earliest date, the earliest cutoff date would be the date that you notice the council meeting, which would be approximately, you know, 4 weeks from now. But if the council wants to, you know, if the council sees the list and they decide that they want to provide, you know, additional time, then that's perfectly fine too. But I think that at minimum there should be a pipeline provision. And my personal preference, I don't know how my colleagues feel, is that the latest or the earliest date that should be the noticing of the council hearing on this. And then the third would be that the council, you know, consider, you know, a separate cap for you know, additions or modifications to a structure. I'm not sure how to best word this because I don't want people to sort of be able to weasel around it. But basically, you know, your 0.35 for, you know, a vacant site or a site that's being scraped or that's, you know, a separate structure is fine. I just think if someone, if you want to do like if you think a square footage cap makes more sense for, you know, in addition, if someone's adding a couple of floors of something to an existing building or adding on to a historic structure, they're preserving the historic portion of it and adding on to it. And if if it's easier to do that as a square footage cap as opposed to an FAR cap, then I'd be open to that too. But I think the fundamental recommendation there is to maybe consider having a more lenient cap for that type of project versus, you know, just a scraped site or a vacant site that's starting from scratch. That's the three-pronged approach in addition to the staff recommendation.
Commissioner Gutierrez.
Yep. All right. No, I agree with the perspective that Chris brought up. Now it's just a matter of the rest of us trying to figure out if we'd like to go either with a square footage amount or the FAR. I'm open to either or, but I think if we go with the square footage, we'd have to really look into the size more seriously and not just throw a number out there. Right? Thanks.
Commissioner Hammer.
Yeah, I would also just have concerns about picking a square footage amount without greater information. I don't know anything about the Morales project or where that would be, and would want to make sure it's equitable across any other projects that would be in the pipeline. I also would like to commend Commissioner Clark for coming up with a three-pronged approach on the cuff. So thank you for that framework.
Vice Chair Yin.
I concur with the other commissioners that I don't feel like I have enough information to determine square footages. So I sort of, in that realm, sort of leave it up to staff to figure out where that cutoff needs to be. For me, I would be amenable to looking at a date, though I can't say what that date might be. So for me, it would be the two things, which is prioritizing phase 2 and sort of a pipeline exemption date. I would be comfortable with just going with staff recommendation as well on that too. So I'm not ruling that out, but I do totally understand the parity issue. So I'd be open to looking at a date.
Commissioner Nunez?
Let me lower my hand. Yeah, I also don't want to get into the technical weeds of a square footage number. And yeah, I mean, setting a date I think would be a good compromise here. So I can definitely support that. Not sure that I want to be the one to come up with a date, or that really kind of think about it too hard. If we don't have to, if staff feels there's a good framework they can deploy, then that would also be good. But Commissioner Clark's compromise seems pretty reasonable.
So Eric, quick question for Eric. Do you have a thought on how do we deal with these, existing site approach? Sounds like the majority of the commissioners are uncomfortable deciding on a square footage number. Is there a different way of addressing the FAR number that would, I don't know how we vote on something and we say, and staff will come back to council that number.
Yeah. That's a good question. There are a lot of different ways to look at it. If you focus on square footage, then you're letting smaller sites go through and probably not letting larger sites go through. If you focus on FAR, it's probably a little more vice versa. If you are really interested in the addition question, you may want to have something in there that's about like what percentage increase is happening on the building, right? So that they're not just saving a wall. Those are all different ways of thinking about the question, and there are probably more. It sounds to me like what the focus of the conversation has been really around, that there is already a significant structure on the building that's not being reduced in any way, and that the, what's being added on is maybe and I can't say right now, not knowing it very much about the 198 Castro project. I really don't know how much they're proposing to add. I don't know, what the footprint is of that part of the building, or how any of that would be affected by any of this. But these are the point is right, that we don't have enough information to know what those metrics are right now. But I think we can take some thoughts from EPC about, do you care about the size of the site? Do you care about the addition, how much of the addition it is? Do you care about, how much of the building is being preserved? Things like that. And then we may be able to craft a standard or, move that forward to council.
Mr. Clark.
Yeah, so I think it sounds like we have consensus around, or like reasonable consensus around the first point, which is that the EPC recommends that the council prioritize the second phase of the precise plan update process alongside the adoption of the resolution. The second part being, I don't know if it's unanimous, but the there being a pipeline provision, and you can present to council their options, but maybe state, as long as my colleagues agree, that the EPC's recommendation was that or that one of the dates that the EPC recommended looking at was the date of the notice for the city council meeting went out. But obviously, if they want to go farther back to like November 1 or even beyond that, they can. And if they want to be more lenient, they can do that too. But always capturing that I think maybe there was a consensus amongst the EPC that there should be a pipeline provision, and it should be after today. But I'm not sure we all feel that way, but it sounded like a majority might have And then the third thing, I think from a staff perspective, it's probably most important to get those first two things plus the actual resolution in place at that December 6th council meeting, assuming that's what council wants to do. I think you could also, you're probably not going to be able, unless you're superhuman, which sometimes staff is, in the next 5 weeks to craft what a reasonable carve out or more lenient development standard would be for an existing structure. But you could ask the question of council, and you could say that EPC was interested in perhaps having a more lenient standard for existing structures that aren't for additions and things like that. Is it the sense of council that they'd like to look at that? Because you can always add that later. You can always be more lenient later if council wishes. It's hard to go the other direction. So that in my head is sort of a motion. So it would be the staff recommendation with one that the EPC recommends that the council prioritize phase 2 of the precise plan development alongside the adoption of the resolution. 2, that the council adopt a pipeline provision that is a date that provides additional time for applicants to submit applications with a preference for the cutoff date being no sooner than the notice of the council hearing. But you can also present the other options to council too if they don't like that recommendation. And 3, that council consider a more lenient standard for existing structures, like where for additions and things like that. And if they wish to do that, we can explore that further, or staff can explore that further and bring back something more fully baked. And if they aren't interested in it and they want to keep it super clean, then so be it. But at least we've noted that the discussion here was there was at least I think some consensus around maybe looking at a more lenient standard for those particular cases.
Mr. Gutierrez, are you kind of seconding that? Or?
Yes, I'm seconding that, and I appreciate Chris's perspective on that. So thank you for sharing.
Mr. Yin.
Just to clarify, even if today's staff's recommendation passed, is there still a way for someone to come in when gatekeeper process is open to just become a gatekeeper project if they did not meet what we're talking about here?
Yeah, anybody can propose any application that doesn't comply with development standards through the gatekeeper process. And so that would be council's acquiescence for staff to study and work on that project.
Okay.
So for clarity, anybody can propose that, hey, I want to be a gatekeeper, but it's up to council to say, okay, we are going to grant this one.
Right.
So
yeah, exactly.
Okay, just wanted to double check.
Say, I'm going to allow this gatekeeper in downtown to go forward.
Move forward, right.
And that gatekeeper would probably include another amendment to the precise plan to allow for it. So.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay. I'm comfortable with what Commissioner Clark had presented. Because at least from what I'm seeing, that's the direction we're going. That would, that feels comfortable for, I think, the majority of the EPC is my sense of it, but I'll wait till everyone else speaks.
Mr. Dempsey?
Yeah, it looks like we're getting close to a vote here. I wanted to say just 2 things. One, with the nuance that's been added, I think, to this, that gets me close enough, so I'll be comfortable. I'll be comfortable going along with this, and I wanted to commend Commissioner Clark for all his hard work trying to piece all that stuff together to get us to where we were. So I commend him for his clever work there, and look forward to getting this done.
Commissioner Nunez?
Yeah, I can support the proposal on the table.
Commissioner Hammer?
Likewise.
Sounds like we have so you're going to make it a formal motion, Commissioner Clark?
Yeah, I don't know if staff already captured it or if I need to repeat it one more time as a formal motion. But...
I'll just confirm real quick, make sure I have it. Basically, it's a staff recommendation plus a recommendation that council prioritize phase 2 of the precise plan. That recommendation that a pipeline provision also be included with a cutoff date, or some options for cutoff date, but likely no later than the notice for the council meeting. And then
early.
No,
it was no earlier.
No earlier than the notice. Okay. I'm glad I clarified. And then also a recommendation that council request staff to study a separate, more lenient cap for additions or modifications to a building that we could come back to later.
Just two minor changes. The last one, not that the EPC requests that council do that, but that the council basically indicates that there was interest amongst the EPC in having a separate, more lenient standard, and that the council consider that. I wouldn't go so far as to say that we want the council to do that. And then there was one other. Oh yes, and I, while the EPCs, I think general consensus was that the date should be no earlier than for the pipeline provision should be no earlier than the council, the public notice of the council meeting for that item, that you'll present all the options that they have to be more strict or more lenient. And then not really part of what would go, but just maybe if you'd be willing to just update the list of applications for council that you've received at that point, whatever you feel is most reasonable for you. I don't know if you can do it up until the point when the staff report goes out, but I'm sure council might be interested in what has come in since, so they can make a decision on whether to make it earlier or later for that pipeline provision, because there might be folks we haven't heard from tonight who submit something, and maybe those applications won't be of interest. But anyway, that all captures it, I think. And if Eric, that's okay with you, then I'll make that my motion.
All right, got it.
Okay. And Commissioner Gutierrez, are you still seconding?
Of course, yeah.
Right. Vice Chair Yin, you had your hand up. You had a question? Unmute.
I was going to say what Commissioner Clark just said, which is to not say we're requesting that it be no later, but that it is up to their discretion if they want it earlier or not. And I was also going to just ask if we wanted to put a later, the latest date for the point that Commissioner Clark had said earlier about the state law passing, and there's that date that is looming that would sort of take us into the realm of losing out on some of the benefits for which we're doing this entire thing. And I don't know exactly what that date would be if it doesn't take effect 30 days until it's noticed or until the vote. So wait a minute, December 6th is when the council might meet on this. So it's possible that it would be January 6th that it goes into effect.
Yeah, so Sandy was right. It actually does go into effect immediately. And it doesn't matter either way, because nobody would be vested in that month anyway, right? Nobody would get their vesting rights in that period.
I understand now. Okay, thank you. Thank you. It's fine. I third it.
Are we clear or are we not clear? Yeah. Nodding his head. Sandy nodding her head. Okay. Commissioner Clark?
Yeah, before we vote, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. Like, I know I'm still personally uncomfortable with this, but I feel better about it. And I'm sure we all have some level of discomfort with the compromise we've agreed to. But anyway, I really appreciate you all sort of putting up with trying to come up all of your recommendations, sort of putting everything together so that we could figure out a path forward that I think probably fully satisfies no one, but at least gets us, moves the ball forward and solves whatever problem is before.
And Commissioner Gutierrez?
Yeah, I think this is a cool process. When we work like a team like this, you can problem solve. And this is, I think this is what it's all about for me, at least. So this was a good night.
Okay, so where did my clerk go? She keeps moving around the screen. Okay, Joe, can we go ahead and call the roll?
All right, Commissioner Clark? Oh.
You were unmuted.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I said aye.
Commissioner Dempsey?
Aye.
Commissioner Gutierrez?
Aye.
Commissioner Haymeyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Nunes?
Aye.
Vice Chair In?
Aye.
And Chair Creston?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, everyone. Good work. So we will move on to item 6, Commission staff announcements, updates, requests, committee reports. No action will be taken by any item brought up during this time. So Eric, did you have an update on our next meetings?
Sure, yeah, so the next meeting is going to be the housing element. We're getting all of that ready for you. You should expect the final EIR out end of the week. That's our goal for getting that out. So you should be able to find that on the website then. We're working hard to finalize the housing element for your review. You know, our goal is to try to get it out as early next week as we can. If it comes out on Thursday and you only get the long weekend to review it, I apologize, but that may be a reality given what we're working on. So, but it will come out no later than Thursday.
Do we have something for December at this point?
Yeah, we do tentatively. Let's see. Well, I'll just say right now that we do tentatively have some items. I'll have to give a report on those the next meeting.
Just on that, I'm holding the 14th of December for a special EPC meeting. Is that right, or is that old?
So it was a special EPC meeting on the original calendar. Okay. It actually doesn't look like we have any items scheduled for that meeting at this time. Give us another 2 weeks, yeah. And we'll let you know if it's going to be officially canceled.
Of course. Thank you.
Commissioner Clark?
Just to be clear, we should be holding, just to be safe, we should hold the 7th and the 14th for now, but not the 21st.
Yes, the 7th, but not.
Sorry, the 7th and 14th, but not the 21st.
Yeah, no, the 21st was never scheduled as a EPC meeting just because of the holidays. But yeah, for now, this is the 7th and 14th.
Okay, and not November 30th. So, okay.
No.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other announcements?
Yeah, just that it's getting to be that time. And so I'm going to be sending out, holiday party ideas. It's always nice to get together outside of these great heady discussions, but in a more relaxed atmosphere. Just be ready for that, and I'll set up some dates and some possible locations.
And for those of you who heckle those that are replying, interviews for next year are the 28th of November, tentatively right now. So interested in observing those. No other announcements? Mr. Clark, did you have something? Or? All right, with that, then we will adjourn the November 2nd meeting of the Environmental Planning Commission at 10:16 p.m. and our next regular meeting will be November 16th, 2022. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.